And we are live according to YouTube.
Nice. Let's see if it pops up on my end. There we go.
There's no one in the stream yet, so I'll wait for some people to come in and make sure all the sound is working as usual.
Yeah, I'll link it around once I get it going. There we go.
Yeah, some people joining the stream and people leaving. Anyone joining the stream, let us know if you can hear Deox and I as usual before we start.
Toodles.
Toodles or poodles. Poodles or toodles, either one. The viewers keep like going up and down. I don't know if YouTube is being
Yeah,
weird or people are jumping in and then just nope, not watching this.
Corona stream. Let's see. I'll be an asshole on the public Discord and tag everyone.
Hey, I use the at everyone all the time. I don't care. Everyone, can you hear Deox and I before we begin? Just to make sure all the sound is working.
Let's see if that worked.
Actually, let me see how we're about 40 seconds ahead of everyone in the stream according to OBS, so it'll probably be a bit of a delay before they respond to us. Yeah, I'm not sure how to get rid of that gap in time between OBS and YouTube. I don't know if there's just if it's a software problem or a connection problem, but it seems like we're just going to always be like 40 seconds ahead of everyone in the stream. So we'll post this into the Star Fox server.
All the Europeans are complaining about the time, and I'm like, but it's the Corona
Yeah.
apocalypse. What are
all,
you gonna do?
all you Europeans should be on lockdown right now. This is entertainment. I'm technically on lockdown too, but
If
most
anyone
of
is
the
listening about
huh?
if my any of like if any fellow Europeans listening are complaining about the timing, I have work tomorrow. What's your excuse? To
Set
be
to
fair, it's in
ultra
the
low
afternoon, but
latency. Oh, I didn't think of setting it to low latency, but I've already started the stream and apparently I can't switch it, so I'm stuck with normal. I'll try that next time and see if it gets rid of the delay between OBS and YouTube. Yeah, so I'm technically on lockdown, but my state is not really enforcing it, so I mean the warehouse I work at hasn't had me coming in 2 weeks, so I haven't really been going to work. But I had to pick up a prescription last week, and there's still people walking around everywhere. So no one seems to be listening to the lockdown where I live.
it's the same here. And I would say our lockdown is a bit more strict. But the thing is, you still see people out and about. Uh, like we've been told, please don't go outside unless you have to. Or at least if you have like an explicit reason to why you have to go outside, if you have to do shopping or whatever. But I see people at work just hanging around town, right?
Yeah.
They obviously have nothing to fill their day with, so they just hang around.
There's a
But
lot less traffic here as far as cars, but there's just people walking around like all over the place. Like, great job, guys.
yeah, I mean, I say that I work tomorrow, but it's like 4 hours. They cut my day in half. So I don't honestly 4 hours of work. I don't even consider that work. By the time I get into the workflow, I'm already done.
Yeah.
So I just kind of have to go in, do some work, and then leave.
Yeah, as Fabrizio Mazzotta asked, yeah, I have been just doing pretty much nothing but Hyrule Conquest. I did binge Stellaris for a day, and then if it wasn't evidenced by the thumbnail, I've had Game of Thrones on in the background. Let's see, did anyone know the remix from the Sanctuary remix from the Hyrule Total War Mission 19 cinematics? I think that's the one Adam did. Is that the pipe organ remix of the Sanctuary theme? Um, when Agnem appears. Oh, that's the one by Symphony of the Goddesses. The one that plays when Agnem yeah, after Ganondorf massacres Princess Zelda and then Agnem shows up. That's the one from the Symphony of the Goddesses, their thing from 2011. And then the pipe organ one from when Hylia has her first meeting with Demise. That one is a remix Adam did years ago.
Oh yeah,
He'd probably tell me he wants to redo that if I
he
redid that
probably wants to.
cinematic.
I actually don't have that track. Do you have it?
The pipe
Random,
organ
but
one?
yeah.
Yeah, I still have it.
If when you have time, would you mind sending me it? Because I
Yeah.
was looking for it the other day and I couldn't find it. So
Yeah. Actually, I like that one. Even though it's simple, I think it still holds up despite how old it is. Um,
yeah, I'd say, but I mean, Adam, yeah.
I suspect Adam would want to redo that track whenever I finally redid that mission, though.
I
Uh,
mean, I think it's serviceable, honestly.
yeah.
But then obviously he is the creator, so he probably has more,
He
like.
seems kind of like me, where he hates everything he did from like 2 or 3 years ago.
Honestly, I would say that's most people, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already redoing the Kingdom of Hyrule in like the next day or two. I'm remodeling their buildings. Don't worry, I'm not gonna do that to every faction in the game. Just the Hylians, because the Hylians were kind of like the guinea pig when I started porting everything to 0 AD, and I was figuring things out. But I'm redoing the Hylian buildings. Most of their units are the same though. They're only getting a few new units, so I'm not completely remodeling everything. And all the buildings I do have modeled for them are just gonna be they're just gonna be used for the Hyrule Castle town.
Speaking of that, I forgot to ask you last time because it's kind of relevant because I've been tinkering with the descriptions and editing the language and everything. But since you're now going back and wanting to redo it, should I just wait until you're finished, unless you want to add more descriptions and stuff?
You mean for the tooltips? The
Yeah, yeah, everything pretty much.
um
Because I don't mind
not
waiting until you start.
you can do it for their units because most of their units are the same, but I mean some of their buildings will still be the same. Like they'll still have the town center and the storehouse and their houses. It's mostly it's the upgraded versions of their
Mm.
buildings that are getting removed.
I mean,
So I mean you can do it if you
it.
want. I'm sure I'll use your text for something.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking if you wanted to add more text, then I might as well just wait to finish it until you're done with redoing the Hylians, so that there's no kind of like so I get to do everything in one go. I was thinking about
Yeah, I have a feeling the Highlands will go by pretty fast,
probably
compared to like
probably.
making a whole new faction, because most of the stuff's already there.
Yeah.
Um, I'm slightly remodeling, not like their entire model, but some of their shields and stuff are getting remodeled. I'm not happy with some of their equipment. I think if I remember, if I check my little list here, I think they have 3 new units. They'll have a bannerman, a guy who carries around a little standard, which will be a little more useful when Exo and I get battalions in. They're going to have another mage kind of unit, and they have, I think, another spearman unit if I remember right. I might change their scout to just be a cavalry from the very start. I haven't decided yet. So yeah, Highlands are gonna get quite a few changes. They're gonna get the city thing if you play as Link, so that'll be cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to you're gonna go ahead and do the other ones, right? The other old factions, like small tinkering on
Yeah.
them as well. Yeah.
Not nothing's gonna be like completely redone like the Kingdom of Hyrule, but the Gerudo or it's mostly like small tweaks. Although the Zora still don't have their aqueducts working properly, so when those are in the engine, the Zora will probably get shifted around quite a bit.
Speaking of the Gerudo and rework, because I was talking to EXO the other day, and he showed me the balancing proposition that Odysseus made. And there was actually a really good idea in there. So he probably forgot it, so that he doesn't forget about it. So I bring it up to you that a potential technology for the Gerudo could that killing units and hurting and destroying buildings could give them some rupees.
Yeah, I mean
That is sounds like a really good idea actually.
they should be able to do that by default.
Yeah, like either as it could be like a passive thing they have, or as a technology, or you have a technology that buffs the passive. But I think that inherent idea is just really cool, and it fits them really well as kind of like a raider sort of faction.
Yeah, they're supposed to be like a raider kind of faction. He also suggested they get their cavalry in the village phase. So the I don't know, the Gerudo will get a few tweaks, but I'm not like completely redoing all their buildings or
No,
units. So
I don't think they need a lot of changes. I just think they need more like more of a narrower design philosophy on what they're supposed to be, and you can pretty
yeah,
much do that by tweaking them a bit. You don't really need to add anything.
Odysseus also recommended that Urbosa actually be like a heavy armor kind of hero instead of because right now she's actually kind of similar to Link where she's like spam infantry hero.
Yeah.
Um, but he convinced me that she should be like a heavily armored hero, so she'll probably give marauders and stuff like suits of armor.
I mean, that would be really cool, and it would be an option for if you're playing as the Gerudo, even though you are not a very heavy armored sort of faction or defensive faction. You have the option to change into that if you think you need it, which is
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah, so
Uh,
so yeah, the all the factions are gonna get tweaks, but yeah, Kingdom of Hyrule. It's basically, oh, they're not gonna be completely brand new, but yeah,
no, and I mean, I guess we should address before I forget. We should probably address. So this is kind of random, like a random stream, guys. Like we don't have a
yeah,
concrete topic. We'll literally just talk about anything that comes to mind. I'll try to keep it Hyrule Conquest centered, centered, but I can't promise anything. But like, if this is a good time to ask questions,
yeah. This
because
is probably in like 15 minutes just gonna devolve into Q&A, and I see some questions already, so I'll answer them in just a second. But yeah, we have no topic other than just Hyrule Conquest. Yeah.
it's a Corona stream,
Yeah.
basically.
Basically, I just released Labyrinth and the Fairies, and I'm kind of taking a break for a day or two before I start redoing the Hylians. So I might even do Star Fox stuff tonight before I go to the Hylians, because poor Star Fox needs some love.
I think I've said it before, but I say it again. The Tar map is your best map by
Yes,
far, and I think it.
I'm going to allow a little bit of pride to corrupt me, but I
Yeah,
think it
pat
is my
yourself on the
favorite.
back.
It is my favorite. I knew, well, it's because it's like the one map I've wanted to do too. It's my favorite location in all
Yeah,
of all of like not even Nephi canon, even in the Nintendo games. Just there's and I think honestly I think it's just because of the music. It has my
yeah.
favorite
I mean,
track in the whole series.
even back in that back in the day when the technology was rather limited, it had this sort of kind of feeling to it,
I feel
and
like the
I
Tarm
think your map
Ruins.
captures that.
Yeah, I feel like the Tarm Ruins track. It of all the music in the entire series, it actually captures like what Zelda's supposed to be.
Yeah,
Like this, it just has like this like very mysterious kind of like mystical feeling, like you're exploring something very ancient and very magical. Um,
yeah.
that track seems to that stupid little 8-bit track on the Game Boy seems to capture it better than any of the other music.
I think for me personally, it's Tarm Ruins, and it's also like the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time. I think those two locations really captures the
I
essence of
think I
Zelda for
actually
me.
agree with you. The Forest Temple and more of like the kind of sinister sort of like the sinister version
Yeah,
of it, because the Forest Temple it definitely has like that feeling of like some kind of mystery, but it's more like a dark, fucked up thing you're uncovering, not something
Yeah.
magical and mystical. Because of all the freaking Link chanting.
Yeah, I mean, the music is eerie, but I think it's something with the location. Just the Lost Woods in general, as a location, Ocarina of Time, like, really embodies the essence for Zelda for me. And I think, but Tarn Ruins also is like a very good example. It's very hard to articulate what it really is. It's just this kind of feeling. Um, but I think your map really capture that sort of feeling. But it's the best map by far.
Yeah, I really
Uh,
like that map. And even, like, just not even the aesthetics, just the layout of the map and the way the paths, the flow of the map is what I call it. I
yeah,
think is really good. Because the map is technically symmetrical, but I've made it really asymmetrical with all the paths being like destroyed and stuff in certain areas. Oh, we got lots of questions. I should probably go through them before they start disappearing.
yeah.
Let's see. Where was the last one? Let me scroll up. Sorry for asking every time, Neff. But did you find the Symphony of the Goddesses Sanctuary on YouTube or on a website? They used to be on a website. I'm pretty sure all of their because for some reason the Symphony of the Goddesses people have not released. I don't think they've released any of their CDs, which is weird because they've been around almost 10 years now. But I think most of them I found on some website where they hosted the recorded music. Actually, they did have one CD. They had the one that came out with Skyward Sword or whatever, the first one.
Yeah.
Um, I found some of them later on Reddit, like years later. I mean, they have tons of recordings on YouTube, but the ones on YouTube are usually like really bad quality because it's usually just someone in the audience with a phone. It's like really, really bad quality, so I almost never listen to those. But I can't remember what the website was called because it seriously was like in 2012, I think, or 2013. It was almost a decade ago. But yeah, I'm sure there's places you can get their tracks still. I haven't looked for them recently because I haven't. I don't even know if they've made anything new lately. I think they did release a CD like a year or two ago. I think it was the 30th anniversary one.
Yeah.
I haven't actually got that CD yet, but I think I remember listening to it on YouTube. That might not have been Symphony of the Goddesses though, but I'm pretty sure it is. So hopefully that answers that question. Fabrizio Mazzotta, I probably butchered your name. I'm sorry. How many factions do I have left? A lot. How many do I have done? I think I have like 14 done. See, I have Hylians, Gerudo, Gorons, Zora, Kokiri, Goma, Ordana, Laneru, Moblins, Darknuts, Deku, Elizalfoss, Lavernon Fairies. I have 14 done. I was right.
Yeah.
And there's 50 in total, so I'm like a quarter of the way done. Um, yeah, I think that answers that question. Let's see what other questions. Are we okay? Demoko, son of Azathoth. Are we going to talk about Onomausen? I guess we could talk about him.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know if you saw that, but we had on the you probably didn't see it, but it was on the public Discord. I think it was yesterday, or was it the day before?
I
Whatever.
haven't
But
checked
I
the
was
public Discord yet today. I
yeah.
haven't even checked any of my Discords today, other than the Wild Buffalo one.
So we were basically discussing. Okay, this is minor spoilers, not really, because if you've been around enough, it's not really spoilers at this point. But basically, we were just discussing the fact that the role, roles,
Yes,
and how certain characters embody certain roles as archetypes.
that's basically how
Uh,
the sages work.
yeah, and I think initially at least, and how she came to be, Hylia is a very clear representation of the brass tower, and we were actually making fun of in her old model, she's a literal construct, which
Yeah.
was, it's a bit on the nose, but it's kind of funny coincidence there, and we were just discussing the nature of that, and it was a very interesting discussion on how when she sheds that mask, she's fulfilled her casting of that role. Something similar takes up in it, and
Yep.
Unumuzan is
Something
very
else has
similar.
to embody it, and it's
Yeah,
him. Yeah.
and functionally they are very similar. And again, if Hylia still had her old model, it would be very on the nose. It's like very. I mean, I guess that's the pattern, right? I mean, you inevitably got rid of that old model, but it's it still exists in the history of it, and the idea is still there.
See, Bird, I guess this isn't a question. He just says, talk about Tarm. Do it, coward. Alright, so, if we're gonna talk about Tarm, I have to go through a 4-hour lecture on ancient cosmology. So, let us begin. No, honestly, I think I am gonna do a little series on ancient cosmology. Maybe I'll start sometime this week.
I
Yeah, I
the thing
sent
is,
you like the little rough draft I had like a few weeks ago, but I'm just like, nah, I'm not gonna do this. No one's gonna listen to it, but I think I might do it, even
the
if no
thing
one
is,
listens to it.
I actually, for you that actually read the wiki, I've been working on a wiki page for Tarm. But the thing is, I have a hard time because I've reached a point now where I have a hard time distinguishing what is considered spoilers and what's not, because
Well,
my head is kind of filled with everything at the moment.
let me say, I guess I can say something about Tarm that it's. I know it won't be considered a satisfying answer for most people, but and if I make these cosmology videos, it might make more sense, but there's certain things in reality that if you speak them or utter them, they become untrue. My favorite example, which my fiance actually gave this example, is humbleness. You can have someone who's actually humble, but the moment they utter that they're humble, it immediately becomes untrue.
Yeah, that's a really good
Tarm
example.
Tarm is something like that.
Yeah,
It's something where if you try to articulate, and it's I consider it a flaw with language. At least that's the direction I'm leaning. It's the same thing with like saying, "Oh, I'm humble." I think that's more of a language problem than anything else. But I suspect there's something deeper than just a language fluke. But Tarm is something like that,
I
where
think I think we proposed that idea, and I agree. I think a lot of people don't want to find it,
it
satisfactory
It's
of
similar
an
to
answer.
if people are familiar with sophiology, the attempt to articulate Sophia in Eastern
Oh yeah.
Orthodoxy. It's something similar to that. I really hesitate to completely articulate Tarm because I'll
I
unmake it.
I have a
If that
way.
makes any sense.
I think I have a way to give an answer. It's highly material, but I guess it might suffice. It's sort of
Maybe.
borderline spoilers though, but I'll.
Okay.
Okay, so imagine uh the world as you experience it in Hyrule Conquest, and the people that live there. That is a sort of consciousness. That's the surface consciousness, and then you can imagine Tarm as a kind of dream sequence that hosts the subconsciousness of everything on the surface. And the nature, and that's the why it can be understood as subconsciousness. The moment you're conscious of subconsciousness, it doesn't
It does.
exist. It's
Yeah,
not.
it stops
It's
being.
not. It's not subconscious anymore. So that's why we've been joking and saying it's the dream. You see Tarm when you go to sleep. That's why that is the most material and functional way I think I can describe it without putting in a lot of asterisks everywhere. But
Your modern day Carl Jung.
think of it. Yeah, honestly, I'm just gonna outer say it. Think of it as the subconsciousness of the world and what that
Even that
entails.
is a vulgarization of it,
It is.
but
It's a very it's a vulgarization, but I think it's the most functional kind of answer you can give, and I think it gets the idea across. If you ponder on what that means, then I guess you'll get the satisfactory understanding of what it means. But yeah, think of it as a sort of like dream sequence of the world. uh, but that again, vulgarization.
I don't know if I describe it as a dream sequence of the world, but I don't know. I think I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess a better way to phrase it would be a dream sequence would be a part of it, but it's not it. But it's sort of like everything. It's basically the idea that the moment you're aware, that's why consciousness and subconsciousness is a good example. Is the moment you become, you are conscious of the things that are happening around you now, but there are other things, your subconsciousness always present. But the moment that you are aware of those aspects of your subconsciousness, they are no longer subconscious.
I'd probably say Tarm is connected to the concept of doppelganger. Um, I was listening to something about doppelganger a few days ago and the symbolism behind them, and actually, because we have so many mirrors in our modern culture, doppelganger is actually something most modern people never have to deal with because we're always seeing ourselves.
Yeah.
But in a culture where mirrors are very rare and you don't really get to see yourself, doppelgangers are kind of like that traumatic counter with yourself that you don't understand yourself. I think Tarm is connected to that concept too.
Tarm is the Freudian sexual desires you don't understand.
No, I wouldn't. I no.
It's a
I mean,
primordial.
considering how fairies manifest, I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit of that in
Sigmund Freud would be proud.
there. Sigmund Freud was a very fascinating man, but I think he was partially wrong about things.
Oh well, yeah, but
I lean more towards Jung, and even Jung, I think is still wrong on some level, but I think Jung is on the right track, and he thought Freud was wrong.
I mean, there's this idea that we we experience the world in two different states all the time, or we actually experience it in many states, but the most prevalent are your waking state and your sleeping state. They are both aspects of a reality, but they are inherently also different. The problem is that you're not conscious of the other. That's why we forget dreams. Uh,
The sleeping is also connected to death,
yeah.
which the Tarbinian constructs are connected to death. Funny how that happened. The Fae, and even the name Fae, the constructs, the things made out of the ruins itself. The word Fae means fated to die.
Kind of sad.
Yeah, so that's again, and it's funny because you talk about subconsciousness. I manifested this all subconsciously. I love it. There's no escaping the patterns. You can't escape them. They have a grip on us.
I guess we have to address the biggest meme though.
What's the biggest meme?
Are Terminius Sonai confirmed?
What about the Zonai?
Are Terminian Sonai confirmed?
Well, based on how the Zonai are presented in terms of principle in Nintendo canon, basically anything ancient is Zonai confirmed until Nintendo incarnates the Zonai in a more particular way.
It would be so funny if they didn't though, because it would just leave the meme as is.
I don't think they're going to. But Nintendo's so weird that they just might. So I'm waiting to see before before I incarnate anything of the Zonai.
Whenever you see a swirl on a ruin, it's Sonai confirmed.
Hopefully that's a more anyway. Hopefully that's a more satisfactory answer about Tarm. I know people want like something more concrete about Tarm, but I have a feeling we'll just have to experience Tarm in terms of cinematics or like the actual story.
Yeah.
I don't think Tarm is something I could just like put down a bullet point description of. I think Tarm is one of those things that you have to participate with to kind of grasp.
The thing is, any functional explanation, and here's the thing, like most
It
people,
undoes
like,
it.
yeah, the thing is, that's why, when I made the example, it's like you said, it's a vulgarity. But I'd like to think that it gets the basic idea across. But again, like you said, well, it does it by trying to even give a rational, or I would say, or rather functional explanation of what it is. So yeah, I think experiencing is probably the best, and then you get like inherent understanding of what it is.
That's the solution to basically that problem I brought up. The problem of uttering humbleness or uttering things that make them untrue. The solution to that is to just experience them. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to put them into a category and then scientifically define them and make them explicit and articulated. You can just experience them and understand them. Like
Honestly,
that,
it
and which, funnily enough, Sophia or wisdom is generally considered feminine, and I think it was you and I like months and months ago basically said like when you try to articulate Sophia, it undoes it, but the key to
yeah.
wisdom is to experience it. That's how you understand it is through experience, not
And
articulation.
you can see this concept in poetry, and you bet I'm gonna bring up poetry whenever I can. There's a lot of concepts introduced in good poetry that it would be pointless to ask what does the artist say here, right? Because that's not the point of it. The point of it is to experience the words, not necessarily have an answer, which is, I think, a big reason why a lot of students or people, trying to get into poetry, especially certain traditions of poetry, are really struggling, because it's not about answers. It's not about functional explanations.
It's
It
basically a
it
ritual.
Yeah.
or liturgy, I guess. Well, and that's
uh,
why, if you go back far enough, things like poems and songs, you didn't just like listen to music in private in your home. Like it was all a communal thing. Everyone participated in it. It was like a liturgy.
yeah.
You'd participate in the music itself, like even if it's just dancing or like that's how things used to be done. Our I don't know, the modern world is so alien compared to the ancient world and vice versa. It's kind of astounding like how different they are in terms of how
uh,
humans behave in relation to the world. Obviously, humans are still humans. And
yeah. Like,
we're subconsciously manifesting all the ancient stuff we did. We're just not aware of it. We still manifest liturgy. We go to movie theaters and we worship freaking Marvel, and we're still manifesting the same patterns. We're not conscious of it anymore, which is where all the
yeah.
danger seeps in.
I would like, before anyone corrects me, I would, there certainly is a functional element to poetry, but the function doesn't serve its goal. It's more like understanding how the goal is, the path to the goal is made. For example, rhyming and stuff like that. That is all functional, but it's just tools used to enhance the experience. You can there's a difference there's a big gap between reading a poem and analyzing its primary functions in language use and word use, wordplay, and all that stuff, and actually experiencing a poem. Those are two different things.
Well, think of a
uh,
painting. Like, if you look at a painting, the knowledge of all the
yes.
tools and materials someone used to make the painting will not give you the meaning of the painting.
Yeah.
Knowledge of the tools and materials he used might help you appreciate the work that went into the painting and how he did it, but it will not actually give you the meaning of the painting.
Yeah, that's a
You
good.
have to participate and experience in the painting to get the meaning of the painting.
Yeah.
Its
Bring.
material components are like they don't lead to the meaning. Like, I'm sorry, I'm like my
Yeah.
head's starting to hurt because I'm like trying not to rage about modernity.
Bring. Yeah, and yeah, bringing this back to Tarm. Tarm is kind of like that. Think of Tarm as a poem.
Think of Tom as a poem.
A
A
poem.
poem. I hope that becomes a meme somehow. Tarm is a
Poem.
poem. I mean,
Everything that.
technically, if I could use the word technically, all of Hyrule Conquest is like a poem, and
Yeah.
so are all stories.
I mean,
They're basically really long
yeah.
poems.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that's wrong. Let's
um,
see.
Yeah, I guess we should move on from Tarb now.
Yeah, yeah, freaking Tarm.
Can we have a new Star Fox release soon? I think I'll work on Star Fox tonight when we're done here. Actually, I haven't really posted anything about it because no one really gives a crap about Star Fox. But I completely redid all the faces of the main characters like a month ago, so I've had to reanimate their talking portraits. I'm terrible. Um, but all that's really left for Star Fox is to just make all the missions. So I don't feel like I'll release anything until the missions are done because I don't really have anything else to release until they're done. Um, so to answer that question, it probably wouldn't be soon. Not with Hyrule Conquest being the looming black hole of my my time sink. Um, I feel really bad for my Star Fox game. Every time I like it like gets comes to my attention, I like sigh. I'm like, I really want to work on that, but I can't justify it.
If only you could clone yourself.
If
Oh
only I
wait,
could
that would be
clone
really bad.
myself.
But that probably would be really bad, actually.
Yeah, that would be. I've been reading. Actually, you'll probably be happy. I finally ordered the first Song of Ice and Fire book. It should be showing up in the mail in like a week, and then
Awesome.
I'll have it sit in quarantine. So that is next on my to read list. I put everything else off except for the thing I'm currently reading. I'm currently reading a book all about the garments of skin,
Oh,
all about technology from an ancient point of view. It's a wonderful book, but I have a feeling half the stuff is going over my head that I'm reading. It's like too big brained even for me, so I think I'm missing some of it. But it's all ancient people even understood when you put on a new garment of skin, you become subject to the rules of the garment of skin. And for those in the audience that are not aware of what garments or skin are, think of them like technology. There's something you use to augment yourself to hold off death. And basically, at least in the Western tradition, that's kind of what's symbolized when like the first man put on animal skins. They become like animals because they become subject to the nature of the animals. It's like say you lose your arm and you replace your arm with a cybernetic arm and it's got like, all the metal and stuff. Your nature is now subject at least in part to the rules of that technology. So you're less human.
big brain.
Am I
Big
making
brain.
any sense at all? To me, I feel like that's actually the self-evident part. Like, I feel like people kind of actually intuitively understand that. Like, actually, let's use the coronavirus thing as an example. Let's say coronavirus became like this super plague that never ever goes away, and if you catch it, you die, and we're all forced to permanently wear masks. You are subject to the nature of the breathing mask. If you remove the breathing mask, you would die in that situation. Like, you can't survive without it anymore. And I think one of my favorite examples of that symbolism is actually Lord of the Rings. That's what the One Ring is. It's Sauron has put on himself so many garments of skin that if his garments of skin are destroyed, he can't exist anymore. That's why he loses
Yeah.
his ability to shapeshift because he's put on so many he's augmented himself so much. He's lost his original nature. That's technology in a nutshell.
I mean, that's pretty on nose. He's functionally a garment.
Yeah, I don't know. I love Lord of the Rings. I know I'm not gonna say it live because I'll probably be destroyed by people. I know a few days ago we were criticizing Tolkien, but I really do like Lord of the Rings a lot. I really do.
Yeah, I love Tolkien too. It's just I again I think again I strongly hold the opinion that even if you love something, you should it's healthy to criticize it.
He really needs
And
an editor.
well, yeah,
I think that's the biggest critique I have of Tolkien. He really needed an editor, but I think he captured a lot of that old Especially, well, I know he got the ring stuff from Norse mythology, but I think he caught all that symbolism pretty well. I don't even know if he was conscious of it.
He probably was, honestly, because
I
a
feel like
lot
he
of
would
the
have to be because he was so familiar with the languages.
things that he works on is, it's the same thing that I research. The problem is, though, we again, like we talked about with the postmodernism thing, right? We don't have explicit ideas how these people were thinking and how
Yeah.
their symbolism were working. So the thing is, our interpretations might vary wildly, and none of them might be false. That's the, so I he can read the Edda and get an idea. I can read the Edda and have a different idea. They might be related ideas, but ultimately they're different interpretations.
So Tolkien's a necromancer.
Yeah, I mean, functionally, you are a necromancer if you are trying to resurrect dead mentalities, right?
Yes. I mean, we already know that the whole Norse culture was corrupted based on all the stuff that survives from it. Like all the Norse before the Christian monks it's like it's lost. It's completely cut off from the world. All the stuff
Yeah,
that was preserved was in the Western tradition, not theirs.
which is why
So yeah.
a lot of the research that this is not exclusive to Norse like studies or anything, but like in general, any culture that did not leave an extensive written record of their own perspective. Most of the research done on that will be, yeah, maybe might have been like that. That's pretty much like how to summarize everything. I might have been like that. Maybe not. Maybe.
I feel like I should point out that we've gone 41 minutes without YouTube or my internet or anything crapping out on me. So hopefully that
Now,
problem's in the past.
now you have given the problem flesh, so now it might manifest because you
Oh
mentioned it.
no.
Yeah. If you let it be, it wouldn't have interfered. But now you're conscious of it, so now it might come and destroy us.
Let's see. I guess I should look for some more questions. Are there going to be R wings in Hyrule Conquest? They were in Ocarina of Time. There currently is R wings in Hyrule Conquest. If you bring up the chat thing and you type in how do you start this thing or how do you turn this on, it'll spawn an R wing that you can order around the map to blow stuff up. It's the Hyrule Conquest version of the Cobra car from Age of Empires. So yes, there actually is an R-wing already in Hyrule Conquest. You can spawn it with the cheat code. Let's see what other. Wow, there's quite a few. Are we going to talk about the new Hylian army after the Cataclysm of Labrana? I don't know. Maybe we could talk about that. I don't. Because Hyrule's reformed. I don't know if reformation's the word I'd use, but the new Hyrule it comes about long after the Cataclysm of Labrana. It's not like Labrana falls and then they just immediately become a whole new. It's like a gradual process.
Yeah.
Um, it's more like Labrana's just kind of slowly absorbed. There's a lot of margins crossing each other in the Hyrule Conquest. Let's see what else. What other questions we got? I'm almost at the bottom, but I know as soon as I hit the bottom, a giant wall of text is gonna show up. Yep. Um, I really hate the way YouTube's chat thing works because like when I scroll the bottom, it like zooms really far down. I have to scroll all the way back up to like the last
Yeah.
place I was. I hate that. Let's see. Hylia will turn into a bird, right? She'll turn into a she kind of is a spirit already, but she'll become more of a spirit. Hopefully that answers that question. um Here's a good question. Is there a Kingdom of Skyloft in Conquest at all? Yes and no. That might even be news to Deox. um there's kind of a Skyloft, but not in the way people would probably hope for if they really like the Skyward Sword depiction of it. I don't know if I want to go into detail on that quite yet. Undying Nephilim from Kotgor. Your game seems to have a focus on Gaia, natural and non-player unit structures and such within your maps. Is there certain structures mechanics that would be akin to The Legend of Zelda's dungeons? Yes, those are definitely planned. Where there's maps that are structured around a dungeon, and basically the theme of those maps is resources can't really be gathered in the traditional way, so it'll force the players to go into the dungeons to get their resources. And the dungeons will have their own AI and stuff like that. But I'm kind of waiting on EXO to finish his current AI before I delve into that. But yes, there'll be dungeon themed maps and stuff that play a little bit differently from the normal maps. It'll be really cool. At least I hope it'll be cool. Let's see. What other questions did I miss? Did you watch Steven Universe Futures finale? No, I've actually never watched Steven Universe. I only have surface knowledge of that show. I'm not super familiar with it. See, are the Tarminians related to the Triliths? I guess all things to some extent are related to the Triliths. So yes, kind of.
Sunai confirmed.
Zonai. See, the idea of exploration has been lost for the majority of modern Zelda games. At least Breath of the Wild encouraged it. I guess that wasn't really a question, but I think I actually do agree with that statement. I do think Breath of the Wild definitely leans more in the exploration direction than other Zelda games. You could say that was a positive about it. I'm not docking the game for that. I dock Breath of the Wild for its other shortcomings. I mean, I kind of have the belief that even terrible things or like terrible things can have redeeming qualities to them, and even like really really good things can have like a terrible blemish in them. I'm not really like one of these people who's like something is just all bad or something is just all good.
I
Um,
think I
except
you
for
might
Triforce Heroes. Oh, nah, I haven't even
yeah.
played that game. I can't judge it.
I think I agree. I think what I mean when I talk about it, I've said this before, so I'm not gonna repeat myself. But uh, Breath of the Wild certainly encouraged it. I think the main flaw of that game is that because of its openness and due to the nature of its development, it lacked the sort of identity of those areas that Zelda previously had. Right.
Basically,
Uh,
it encourages the journey, but there's no ends, and I know that the journey is kind of the point, but
the thing is, I would like to add that there are certainly examples of such areas. Like I've said before, I think the Lost Woods in Breath of the Wild are great, and I think they do capture that mystical aura that we talked about earlier. The thing is, that is just a tiny area in a very big game, right? And I'm not saying that's the only one, but it's not enough, right? For this compared to the scale of the game, it's in my opinion it was not enough. But I think honestly, and I've said this again, I've said this before. I think in my opinion, I think a lot of it was held back by development, and I know that the engine was a bitch to work with. So I can kind of understand why it ended up the way it did. Honestly, the game kind of feels like they made this really good open world and all this very good engine, and they were like, "Oh shit, we have to make a game." Uh, that's sort of how it feels, and that's why, unlike Neff, that's given up, I'm cautiously optimistic about its sequel because I hope that now they have the foundation that they might add on to stuff, the stuff that felt lacking
the
in
my
it.
my problem is you cannot remove its sequel from the context of the first one.
Probably
So
not,
I
but
I, I
I
can't do that. I know some people are able to do that. Like there's a lot of examples of like the first game or movie or something in a series being terrible and then its sequel is like infinitely better. I think Street Fighter in terms of video games is like one of the great examples, but I cannot divorce let's say the second Breath of the Wild comes out and it's actually a really great game. They do a really good job like fleshing out the characters and stuff. The game is fun. They actually have a decent story. I cannot divorce it from the first one. That context is there, so
Yeah.
you can kind of pretend the first one doesn't exist, but it's always gonna be there in the back of your, at least my mind. I don't know. Maybe other people can. Well, it seems like most people don't hate the first one, so I guess it's not really an issue for them. But for me, like I wouldn't be able to divorce the second one from the first one. I would like even let's go even a step further. Let's say the second one comes out and they completely replace all the voice actors with better voice actors. I'll still hear the original voice actress for a certain character. I cannot divorce that from it. So no matter how good it is, it's corrupted by its origin.
Mm.
I that might be a little autistic of me. I fully admit that.
I again, I think that's fair because that's completely different from. I'm personally able to separate a sequel from its predecessor. Like I don't have an issue with that. But
Maybe I
I've
will
always
try.
I've always said that Breath of the Wild was always held back by the fact that it's a huge game built on inferior hardware, and that they probably ran out of time. The game was delayed multiple times. I do think that the biggest hurdle that game ever had was its development. And I hope that now that they have more leeway to add things, because if you look at the concepts, you follow the development process of the game, there's so much ideas that were cut that didn't make it.
Do you think they'll make a Breath of the Wild 3?
Yes, I do.
I think they will.
I
And
think this is a trilogy. I have a feeling it is a trilogy. If the second game fails utterly, then maybe not. But I have a feeling
I
that
don't think it'll fail.
this train is gonna choo-choo for a while longer.
Don't you mean this cycle is gonna vroom vroom for a little while?
Here's the thing, and I know that's very out of left field to say that, wow, a Zelda trilogy. The thing is, we have a direct sequel, and honestly, I've said this before, Majora's Mask is not a direct sequel. It does not feel like one at all.
I will
Like,
disagree with you completely there. I feel like it does feel like a direct sequel.
not the
But
kind,
I will
not the
concede
sequel I
that
like.
you can play it without the context of the first game and still get something out of it, I guess.
The thing
But
is, I would,
would consider it a direct sequel.
yeah, I probably phrased that wrong. I would consider it a direct sequel, but not in a. It doesn't have the same narratives.
Yeah, it's not.
Narrative
It's
thread.
yeah, it's not the same narrative. Well, we don't even know if the second Breath of the Wild is the same
The thing is,
narrative.
we call it the Hero of Time trilogy, but and it is a trilogy, but the concepts that tie it together are very loose.
But
And here's the
we
thing.
don't know if the second Breath of the Wild is that, if it's the same narrative. I mean, Ganondorf presumably is in it, so I guess it's probably gonna be similar, but it it might have little to no connection to the first one other than Link, Zelda, and Ganon. Like I'm certain the champions aren't even gonna be in the second one. They're just gonna be completely forgotten. They won't even. No one will mention them.
I
All the
I
characters in
don't
the
think
first one are probably gonna be gone, except for the ones that were still alive.
I actually don't think so.
Okay,
Actually,
you think the
I
champions are gonna show up again? Their ghosts
I
are gonna show up?
no, I don't think the champions are gonna show up, but I do think that the characters that are alive in the first game are gonna show up.
Well, that's what I said. The living
Yeah,
ones,
yeah.
the ones that are still alive.
Maybe we'll have the old champions reference because they're so popular. So
I don't even
Nintendo
think
might
there's
want.
gonna be a reference. I think, honestly, I'm probably wrong, but I suspect this one is going to be as divorced. It'll sound ironic because I was saying earlier I can't divorce the second one from the first one, but I suspect the themes and narrative are going to be as divorced from the first Breath of the Wild as much as possible. The only connection is going to be it's the same Link, it's the same Zelda, it's probably in the same Hyrule, like the same geographical location, and Ganondorf is somehow still involved. I don't think you're going to see the champions at all. They're not even going to have a cameo, nothing. No champions, no Rome, no guardians. It's going to basically be a completely different story with loose connections to the first, like Majora's Mask is to Ocarina of Time. That is my prediction. I don't even think we're going to see Sheikah monks. And now I've made a fool of myself in a year when they released the game, and it's everything opposite of what I said.
I do, based on what I have a feeling it's gonna be a direct sequel, like an actual direct sequel, and because the game, you didn't even finish the first game.
No.
But they left a lot of stuff like unanswered.
And they're probably going to leave a lot of stuff unanswered, like they always
They
do.
might, but since Anuma, said that he didn't feel like he felt like they needed to spend more time in this Hyrule with these characters. I have a feeling it's going to be a direct sequel. What that it really entails in a Zelda way, I have no idea because it hasn't really happened. But again, I'm bringing it back to Majora's Mask. The reason why I said I don't really consider it a direct sequel, and I have a very specific kind of understanding what a direct sequel is, and I would say it is a sequel, but it's not a direct sequel in the sense that it shares the same story thread as its predecessor.
I agree with you there. It's a sequel in the sense of like the Indiana Jones movies are sequels to each other, not in the sense that Two Towers is a sequel to Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah, like I know people bring up, whenever I discuss this, people bring up, yeah, but Link is searching for Navi at the start of the game. She's completely irrelevant. Once he encounters this, Skull Kid, that entire plot thread is just thrown out the window.
She's the most abstract principle in that game that Link is following.
I agree. It kickstarts the events of Majora's Mask, but ultimately, it's
That's why she's the most abstract principle in that game, because she's Toddle is it Tattle or Toddle?
I always said Tattle.
Okay, well Toddle, I guess you could say, is an embodiment of Navi, even though their characters are completely not the same at all. So
brother and sister, Tattle and Tail. Get it? Tattle.
Yes, Tattletale, but I've always pronounced it Toddle. Sorry, I got distracted there.
No, but I think I might be wrong. Feel free to call me out if I was wrong, but I have a hunch that Breath of the Wild 2 is going to deal with the same story thread.
I honestly, I don't care which way it goes because I don't plan on even playing the game. So
want to make a bet on it for funsies?
A $2 bet?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll do a $2 bet. I still have that $2 bet with Wanker about if space is somehow involved in Breath of the Wild 2. I have a feeling I'm gonna win that bet, so it'll cancel it out if I fail this bet with you. So all right, we'll make a $2 bet. I will bet that Breath of the Wild 2 will be very loosely connected to the first one, and it will not be in a direct sequel, other than the fact that Ganondorf is the only like kind of transitory thing from the first game in terms of like, a threat to the. You know what? No, because I'm probably gonna lose this. I'm just gonna go all out. Ganondorf is barely gonna be in the game, and he's gonna get sidelined. Some other villain is gonna sideline him. I'm just gonna go all out. I'm probably gonna lose, so I'm gonna go all out with the most balls out crazy theory. Ganondorf is a red herring.
Yeah, I actually agree with that.
You also think Ganondorf's a red herring?
First of all, I'm not even sure if the Ganondorf we see in the teaser is the Ganondorf we think it is. So I honestly think Ganondorf is a red herring.
Then maybe we should not do this bet because we might actually agree more than disagree.
In terms of the direct sequel, though, I think the sequel will be a direct sequel, and that it will deal with the nature of the calamity that we did not get an answer of in the first game. We did not get an answer of what the calamity really is in the first game. So I think that is what it will follow up to.
Okay, well we can make a bet on that then. We'll bet on if the nature of the calamity is actually answered or not.
And
I'm certain I'll lose that. So I should just give you $2 right now.
I also think that the sequel will explore the 10,000-year-old legend that was introduced in Breath of the Wild 2, because I don't think it was coincidental with the fucking, Ganondorf-looking Link. I might sound crazy, but I don't think it was coincidental. I just, no. I refuse to believe. Like, here's the thing: you can say whatever you want with the story writing and direction of Zelda. The artists are, based on the research I've done, they know what they're doing. It's not coincidental. I don't believe it was coincidental at all.
If everything I predict ends up happening, they don't address the ancient legend, and it's just weird art, I'll just have a stream where we get on and I'm just laughing nonstop the whole time, and you're just crying in silence.
No, I'm just gonna be mad, honestly.
You'll just be mad.
I'm just gonna be mad. No, I think the next game is gonna deal with those things, and I think the game is gonna. I'm not sure how it will be set in Hyrule. I do think it will have an element to it. I believe it's mostly gonna be underground.
I mean, I actually agree with you there. I'm certain it's gonna be mostly underground too.
But I do think that the main, story thread they're gonna follow is the nature of the calamity and what really happened 10,000 years ago. That is what I think. And I have a hunch, due to the director of the game, that we're gonna deal with what, the nature of the goddess, like the goddess bloodline, and what that is. I think that is gonna be an element of it.
Nope. None of it's gonna be answered. None of it.
You know who we're talking about, right? The highly obsessed guy.
Fuka Yakapaga. I can't say his name. It starts with an F. Fujibayashi. That's it. The Skyward Sword guy. I absolutely, really don't like him. I'm trying not to use. I don't want to say I hate him because I don't know the guy personally, but I do not like this man at all. I've heard some of the things he said, and I think I ideologically am like the polar opposite of him.
But I think we can do it better. I do think it's going to be a direct sequel in the sense that it will deal with the unanswered questions and themes of the first game.
Alright, well, I'll go ahead and make the bet. I don't think it's going to be a direct sequel. It's going to be a sequel like Majora's Mask, where it's just vaguely connected to the first one. Ganondorf's a red herring. We're gonna see no guardians, no Sheikah monks, no champions. None of the trauma of Zelda being, fighting Ganon for 100 years is gonna be brought up. None of that. Link being dead for 100 years, all of the implications of that. None of that's gonna get brought up. It's basically gonna be.
Are you really doing that?
Yeah, all the implications of Zelda, battling Ganon mentally for 100 years. That's just gonna not even be brought up at all. She's just gonna be a completely fine teenage girl.
But if I play the game and they're gonna use the fact that she was battling Ganon for 100 years as some source of angst, I'm gonna call you right away on Discord while I'm playing it.
All right, well, we're making a bet, so you'll call me to get the $2 from me.
Oh, that's gonna be fun. Okay, we went off.
Yeah, her father's dead, so now she needs a new source to be a bitch. Yeah, I can't complain about my stupid father anymore. Now I'll complain about Ganny.
It's gonna be angsty as hell. I have a feeling.
Angsty Zelda's like the worst thing ever.
That's why I have a feeling it's gonna be angsty as hell.
I think she's gonna be angsty as hell, but it's not gonna be because of her 100-year duel with Ganon.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I don't think they're gonna go deep into it, but it wouldn't surprise me, like, when they're exploring the ruins and seeing pictures of, Ganon and shit, that she'll have, like,
no, no, she's gonna be stoic.
Okay, we'll see.
Like I said, I've already lost this bet, so I'm just going all out with the opposite of what they'll probably do.
I'll buy some chicken nuggets with those
buy
$2.
Me some
yes.
Chicken nuggets. Although I can't really go out right now, so I have to wait. Oh, the game probably won't even come out for a year or two anyway. But all right, I think we've dwelt enough on Breath of the Wild. I really don't even like talking about it, so I think I'll look back at the stream.
Yeah,
See, Wispy Whisker says there once was a dream called Rome. You could only whisper it any louder and it would vanish. It was so fragile. By Emperor Aurelius. I recognize the icon of this Wispy Whiskers guy. I think he grasps what we talk about in all these streams.
Yeah,
He seems
I
to
think
post
so.
things in like all these streams that are like, yeah, he's on the right track. I think he understands what we're saying. Have you ever heard of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Yes, I have. Is all of the Oka units based on something in Twilight Princess, or most of them are made up, except for their Titan being from Skyward Sword? Off the top of my head, all of their stuff, with the exception of their Titan, is inspired by stuff from Twilight Princess. Trying to think if there's something of theirs that isn't. I mean, most of their units, their motif is the Dominion Rod aesthetics, which is Twilight Princess. The statues too. I can't think of. There probably is something in their roster that I
Weren't
can't think
there-
of, but
Obviously, this has been like 2 years ago, but I remember way back we discussed on the Discord that some of their units might have take inspiration from the weird robots from Skyward Sword.
no, that's the Guardians.
Okay, so you didn't do that because you
No.
said you weren't sure.
No,
okay.
I didn't do that. No, that's the Guardians.
Guardians.
Guardians. Let's see. Can you also do or also use the Chamber of Sages? Are you asking if the Chamber of Sages will show up? I mean, it kind of already did in a way. In the Zelda's Dream, in the Tarm. So I guess that's yes. The Chamber of Sages manifested itself in a very abstract way in Nephi canon at the moment. See, when we look at the soldiers' outfits in Zelda Spirit Tracks, we notice that they abandoned their medieval armor against the uniforms of the modern Japanese. Actually, Randy Tahiti's. I think you might be right. They might be based on Imperial. Because I saw the green uniforms and like, oh, they just based them on Link, but I think they might actually be right. They might be based on Japanese military uniforms. I didn't even notice that. Like pre-World War II. Huh. That's a weird choice for them to pick for a Zelda game. Let's see, wouldn't it be logical that the medieval Hylian army, realizing the firepower of Labrna, decided to modernize? Well, they do modernize a little bit. I just, they don't jump from knights and plate armor to British soldiers on the front lines of, in the trenches of World War One. There's kind of a several hundred-year transition there. I mean, gunpowder was around during the Middle Ages. It wasn't, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't all the Middle Ages, but anyway. Sorry for asking every time, Neff, but did you find the Symphony of the Goddesses? Yeah, I already answered that question. Man, these questions must be really far behind. There's probably so many I haven't even seen yet. Capcom had all this cosmology in mind when creating the Oracle games. By cosmology, do you mean like the kind of, do you mean Nintendo's cosmology, or the when I'm talking about like ancient cosmology, like in old cultures on Earth? I'm not sure.
Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certain Nintendo, at least in the loosest sense, keeps. Well, no, I don't think they entirely keep their cosmology intact because Skyward Sword happened.
Yeah.
It depends. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But this person specifically is citing the Oracle games, so I mean, I agree the Oracle games don't seem to kind of contradict anything that was established in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. They're kind of divorced from those games to a degree. Although the Triforce talks, but that's kind of in line with A Link to the Past, I guess. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna add that if they were talking about if they had like a very complex cosmology in mind. I don't think so. Maybe at times, but I never like consistency has never been a Zelda thing, like in terms of lore or geography or anything. But one thing I do agree that they are consistent with is theming. I always think Zelda, even the games I don't like, they have a certain theming going on. And I do think they've been consistent with that. And I'm talking specifically about the theme of the narrative. And I do think that's something there are exceptions where I do think
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think Majora's Mask has the same themes of any other Zelda game at all. Majora's Mask is in a league of its own.
I do think that Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess, when put together, has a certain theme to it that
they
is
do.
Consistent.
Which makes the fact that Twilight Princess isn't a sequel to those two in a more direct sense all the more sad. It really should have been. It really should have been.
Again, I feel like I say this all the time today, but again, as I've said before, I think the biggest like break of theming in Zelda for me is still Phantom Hourglass and what it did to Wind Waker's ending.
Yeah. No, you're kind of right. I don't hate Phantom Hourglass nearly as much as you do, but I do kind of agree with you there.
I think it's unfair. Like I do agree, it's kind of unfair. I've seen people say it in the Discord at times that it's kind of unfair of me for disliking it so much. But the thing is, to me, the ending of Wind Waker was like the best ending to Zelda for me. Like not just that specific ending, but what it represents. And I do feel like Hourglass takes a lot away from it.
The fact that they made Twilight Princess right after Wind Waker, that basically makes them to be hypocrites in the context of Wind Waker to begin with. So Wind Waker is all about like, let go of the past. Honestly, it's oddly enough, it's a lot like the Last Jedi. It's like, kill the past, let go of the old Hyrule, let go of these things you love and embrace the new. That's like that's one of the themes, and that's the end of the game. They leave the islands and they go out into the ocean of pure potential. Like I don't know, unless I just horribly misunderstood the game, but
no,
it was a very not subtle way to say like all you assholes who complained about Zelda, fuck you and Ocarina of Time, but Wind Waker rightfully was a financial bomb, and then they made Twilight Princess and went back on everything.
I think again, speaking of the end of Wind Waker, and as I mentioned in that stream we did ages ago about Breath of the Wild, that's why I was so mad about the ending. I wasn't really mad, but disappointed because they were very close to a similar ending, and they didn't deliver. They were very, very close.
Yeah.
But okay, now we're getting a sequel, so I guess my initial argument is null, because I didn't know they would be making a sequel at that point. But the first game, without considering this potential sequel, or sequels, I should say, they were very close to have a very good ending if they wanted to.
I see a really good question. I'm sorry. Continue what you're saying, and I'll go.
No. I'm just saying because if you think about it, how Breath of the Wild could have ended without really drastically changing anything. Really, you could kept the epilogue mostly intact. They were very close to a very good ending there.
For Breath of the Wild?
Yeah.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. The Princess Zelda's complete, her shift in her perspective. I'm gonna be queen now. Queen of nothing. I guess her father was right.
Yeah, I guess it was foreshadowed.
I kind of hope like 10 years from now, after several games, like Rome ends up actually becoming like my favorite character, because he's just like he ends up being right about everything.
Just called it out. I mean, he is not wrong. Even when you achieve the happy ending, he's still right.
Yeah, he's technically right. His issue is he doesn't understand why he's right. Because he's a boomer. That's the flaw of his character. He doesn't he has the wisdom, but he doesn't have the understanding, which is actually backwards to the problem of modernity.
I actually think Rome is a pretty good character, as flawed as he is. It's a shame we didn't see more of him, but because he actually is a good character. Like the small snippets that we got of his arc is really good, and it's a shame that we didn't get more of him because I
Sadly,
do actually.
sadly, the reason I kind of like him is because he is in conflict with a character I hate. So that's not really a fair reason to like a character, I guess. But I don't
I
know.
mean,
I'm
as a
curious.
person, I don't like him at all. It's just that when I consider a character, I don't really, I try to distance myself from my personal opinion of the character or as a person. But I try to be objective as possible with the character, and I do think it's a good character.
Now you're sounding like a modernist.
I'm a modernist.
But speaking of modernists, I see a question that I think is pretty good from Jack Morin. We were discussing the nature of Tarm ruins, and we felt that the construction of the ruins around the essence of Tarm itself was an attempt to create a brass tower. Would this be accurate? Yes. There is something to say about the fact that they're trying to put a boundary and categorize Tarm to some degree with the ruins itself. The ruins is like the construction of it's like a city. Not in the same sense of like a city that you live in, but it's a garment of skin basically. They're putting layers around the essence, which if you know what the word essence means, that would probably explain a lot. They're putting garments of skin around the essence of Tarm, and they're trying to encapsulate it. And by doing that, it has the opposite effect of what they're trying to do. So it should be no surprise that whoever tried to do that with the ruins is no longer
Honestly,
around.
The best comparison to the real world you can make about that is a church, honestly, or a temple.
Yeah, a temple is like a layers of garments of, well, they even, that's why they have veils in older churches. They got rid of them for some reason. But I mean, they're still in some Eastern Orthodox churches, but that's what the veils are. They are the layers or the categories between the center of the church, which represents the Ark of the Covenant, like the actual presence of God, which you can't actually be in, and they'd have layers of veils, and the further out you go in the church, the actual physical structure, the more vulgarized it becomes. And then you have the narthex, where outsiders and insiders mingle with each other, and then on the outside of the church you have the gargoyles, you have the monsters on the margin. The church is a microcosm. The actual physical structure of a church is a microcosm of the structure of reality. At least that's what it's supposed to be. At least the ancient churches or the older ones. Modern churches are like a fucking nightmare.
Like,
nightmare of modernity.
But that's the paradox to it, because the true house of God is not a house at all.
I know.
So,
but it's understood. It's understood as garments of skin. But garments of skin, in and of themselves, are not bad.
no. But in a way, it is a brass tower, because it's a human interpretation of something that is hardly or difficult to comprehend. You're adding too much material to it.
It is. Oh, now you're starting to sound Gnostic, but
yeah, but
it definitely can become a brass tower, and I definitely think we've seen that with churches over the last few thousand years. They've definitely turned into brass towers. But all of human activity is raw material for a brass tower, so that's just the risk of. That's just the risk. Like, that's always there. It's not going to go away anytime soon.
I think I said it the other day in the Discord, is that when I say, I think brass towers are pretty inherent to our nature.
Yes.
I don't, and that doesn't mean make them a bad thing. The problem is when you replace what it should be the ideal with the brass tower.
Yeah, and that's probably what the people who built the Tarm ruins did. They encapsulated Tarm. They built their garments of skin around it, but they ended up idealizing the garments of skin that they built, not the
Yeah.
thing at the center, and the thing at the center destroyed them because they no longer it was no longer their principle anymore.
It's kind of the idea that
That's what the brass tower is. It's taking these garments of skin and putting them at the top instead of what they're encapsulating, the spirit at the center.
again, bringing this to the real world, I think the moment that you start valuing a certain church or a cathedral over any other church, that's when you kind of you're on the wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, when you're saying that Notre Dame is a more valuable house of God than a random provincial church, you kind of you've lost the way a bit.
Yeah. Although I would definitely say that Notre Dame is more beautiful than a lot of modern provincial churches.
Yeah. In essence, they all should be equal, but obviously materially, you can recognize that one is a better,
Now, the presence of the ideal will be at the center of any structure around it. That's the idea. Like, so again, yeah, even if it's like a freaking mud hole in the ground, and they represent this cosmic structure around the center, then it is in theory just as valid as something like Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope that answered the question about building the ruins around Tarm. So yeah, it was like a brass tower. Let's see, is Tarm is related to Doppelganger? Yeah, I already talked about that. See, I was wondering that do I can't see the other units you can't view in the Okara. Forgive me, Lord of Creation, but your grammar is strange there. I'm not sure what you're asking. I think you're asking if you can see the Oka roster. I don't know if I've posted the Oka roster on the public Discord. It might be on there.
I think it's in the archive somewhere, but I'm not sure if it's up to date because it's old.
Let's see. How large is the aura's destructive range before the non-lethal wave? I don't have a number. All you need to know is that it dismantles a city.
Yeah, it's as strong as
it's a garment of skin that destroys other garments of skin. See, in Nephi canon, does Tarm materially exist? It has embodiment, so yes, but it exists abstractly too. But I think that's how all things exist. All things exist in part material and in part abstract. If you want to use older, religious language, you would say, we all have a body and soul. That's basically the premise behind that. But all things, I think all things in all of reality are both a combination of material and immaterial. Like, there's no way to get around that. Everything has something to it that is not visible. Even like a rock. Although now I probably sound like an animist, but like, there's the spirit of rockness. Like, when you leave the presence of the rock, you have the image of the rock in your head. You're carrying its essence, its spirit elsewhere, and extending it into the world in a non-material way. So yeah, Tarm does materially exist, but it also doesn't. But I think that goes for everything, both in Nephi canon and even in reality. Let's see what other questions there are. Let's see. Lost Kingdom of Orgoth. What will their culture be based off of? Ooh. Do I want to spoil Tweely stuff? Orgoth, I think more than any other culture in Nephi canon, they really kind of push the symbolism of like a vampire. Basically a corrupted hierarchy that feeds off of the body. The spirit that feeds off of the body, basically. That's probably what led to their destruction. They are also connected to the undead too, so you probably see a bit of Eastern European influence in them, uh, particularly like Hungarian, something like that. I don't want it to be really on the nose, but you'll probably see some Eastern European aesthetics slipping into Orgoth's designs. That actually might make Codeman a little bit happy. I don't know if he cares about Orgoth or not, but Orgoth or Czechoslovakians. No, I'm not saying Czechoslovakians are all vampires.
You sure about that?
Alright, what other questions? So, do I still experience harm when I lucid dream?
No.
Not really. I mean, you kind of do, but not really in the same way. So, I'm leaning more towards no. Let's see. In Ocarina of Time, they were selling fairies. It says in a battle in Castletown, but I think he means in a bottle. But yeah, I think the symbolism of a fairy in a bottle is pretty self-evident. You're trying to encapsulate. You're trying to encapsulate a spirit in an artificial way to give life to something. I love it. Let's see. Mirror world, parallel universe. I get from that explanation. I'm not sure what that's in a reference to, but I would not. I don't entertain the idea of like parallel universes, at least not in Nephi canon. I think that's a very very warped and modern way to look at things. The whole idea of like infinite parallel universes, which I still point out. Let's come out of let's come out of symbolic land and into the material realm. There's still no empirical evidence for parallel universes at all. It's completely theoretical. So I always find it really funny that so much science fiction is obsessed with this idea of parallel universes and alternate realities. And the thing is, it actually doesn't surprise me. I know why that is. It's because our culture is obsessed with individuality and potentiality and possibility, basically. So I'm not surprised that pattern is manifesting, this idea of, oh, there's all these parallel universes everywhere. Like, I'm not surprised that's a thing, actually. But I don't buy it at all.
I mean, even if that were the case, that such a thing, if that is, they exist in a way, ultimately, based on theoretical ideas, we wouldn't be able to interact with those anyways.
Yeah, I would say that's all purely abstract.
Yeah. So
I don't think it can be embodied. Not in the way like a materialist would think of it. I mean, you can embody identities separate of a particular, so I guess to a degree they are right, but no. See, Link cheats Chetra because of Lear. I wouldn't use the word cheats, but you're onto something there. Let's see what else. I'm probably so far behind in the chat. I have no wife. I'm married to Principality. Principality is kind of like a marriage on a large scale. I'm not I don't know. I would probably hesitate to use the word marriage, but it is like a marriage. It's a principality is a communion of a bunch of beings, both living and non-living, that form an identity that at least acts as if it has a will of its own. I'll give that concession to modernists. Okay, I'm not seeing questions now. Maybe I'm almost at the end of the questions. Let's see. Let's see. Wouldn't it be more logical that the Tarminians are related to the Trilith, like the first civilization possesses sufficient power to... Okay, well, I'll go in a little detail about the Tarminians. Basically, the premise of the Tarminians is that they're cut off from the world, and you can't learn about them because they're disconnected from the memory of Hyrule. Like any human civilization that came before the oldest ones we have on record, like well, there's some before Sumeria, but it's so disconnected from human memory that it's dead. It's like I always joke, you know, the world is billions of years old, but the world is also probably only 7,000 years old because human memory doesn't go beyond that. Anything before that basically doesn't exist in terms of human experience. So the Tarminians are like that. They're so cut off that, yeah. Hopefully that gives a little bit of
They're not just dead. They're super dead.
yeah. Any attempt to learn of them would be necromancy in its most extreme way, which again, the golems that are brought forth from Tarm represent the dead. Anyway, hopefully that gives a little bit of insight on Tarminians. Let's see, what do clubs with dancing not exist anymore? I'm not sure what you're asking there. Let's see, what other questions? What factions in Hyrule Conquest resemble the Vikings, samurai, and Chinese cultures? I'm going to stop myself from making a very horrible Chinese joke right now because of what's going on in the world.
Malice.
What?
No, nothing.
I have a very, very dirty joke I could make about Chinese culture right now, but I'm not going to. I would not say that cultures in Hyrule have like a one-to-one relationship with real world cultures. As far as like inspiration, naturally the Sheikah probably have the biggest connection to samurai, although I would say they're not like samurai at all other than some aesthetics. Vikings, well, what do you mean by Vikings? Because I suspect when you say Vikings,
Really?
you mean yeah, Deox. I can already see his face. Like, I can see smoke coming out of his ears. I suspect when you say Vikings, you mean a bunch of hairy, angry men on boats going around raiding people and raping
Really?
women. That is not actually what Vikings were, but if that is what you mean, then I guess the Moblins are probably the closest to that. No, Vikings, I always joke, the most accurate representation of Vikings in anything that I've ever seen, and even this isn't completely accurate, is actually Rohan from Lord of the Rings. And they don't even have boats.
I mean, horses are kind of like boats.
I get, yeah. Yeah, they're under the same principle to some degree.
The word for journey in Norse invokes both sailing and riding. So
that's really awesome and not surprising. But I'm not saying that Rohan is like, you know, they perfectly encapsulate that culture. But I'm just saying they are the closest thing I've seen to properly embodying that culture. They just need to be along the ocean and in a much colder climate. I would say the Riverzora are pretty close to Vikings. Yeah. No, well, they're close to that image of the you know, crazy barbarian raider Viking, I guess. And you know, they also come from the water too. I would actually say that image of the crazy barbarian Vikings coming over the ocean and raiding and stuff, that image is actually in a bunch of cultures, like even in Irish culture. That's the Falmor, or not the Falmor, the Fomorians. I always get them mixed up.
Fomorians.
Is it Fomorians, Lizzie?
It's Fomorians.
Okay, I don't know why I mix them up with the Falmor. The Fomorians, you know, they're these big brutish monsters that come from the ocean and invade Ireland. That pattern is in like all the cultures. That's the monsters in the margin coming in. Which is what the Riverzora are. They're the monsters from the most extreme end of the margin coming into the land.
Viking barbarian stereotype.
Yeah, I would say they're that stereotype.
I guess, yeah.
But again, that stereotype transcends the Viking stereotype. That's in like a bunch of cultures.
I think the image is slowly changing, though. Honestly.
Huh?
No, I do think the image of Vikings is slowly changing.
Yeah, it'll change to whatever threat is on
The thing
modern
is,
margins.
I can go on a tiny tangent regarding Vikings and barbarism. Is that any culture has elements of barbarism, and any culture that is defined by barbarism is not sustainable. So you will never find a culture that's sustained fully by barbarism.
Yep.
Because that's. But any culture does have elements of it. It does, even a civilization as sophisticated as Rome was not immune to it.
Yeah.
You will always find as long as there are humans, there will be barbarism.
Just look
and
at
savagery.
Japan during World War II.
Yeah.
The rape of yeah.
and I think the best idea to understand Vikings or the Norse were because they were mainly exporters of violence to be able to play the interpolitical game in their homeland. They had to export violence, but a culture defined by violence is not sustainable. That's why you will never find that.
Yeah.
But again, every culture, even our culture, modern culture, has. We're not defined by violence, but
yeah, just look at American politics.
Yeah, but it certainly is an aspect of us.
It's in the margins, and it always will be. I know that's a very negative message, but it's better to recognize it so it doesn't manifest itself in destructive, terrible ways, which is what it's doing. All right, let's see if I can find the next question. See, Demoko, can you make me the next Sage of Time instead of Lear and Tetra? Well, you would have to embody the principle of the Sage of Time better than Lear or Tetra. Demoko doesn't necessarily have that authority. None of the okay, I guess I should maybe explain how the sages work, but
again,
I should make that video on ancient cosmology, because the sages are this idea of embodiment to the extreme. Basically, whoever in the world most embodies the principle of a sage, they're the sage, and that's why the other sages lose their powers. If say there's a sage of fire, and he embodies everything that is the sage of fire, and then as time goes on, he stops embodying it. His character changes a little bit, and he starts acting his part differently. As soon as someone else in the world starts embodying those principles more, the title of sagehood will shift. Now, the sages in Hyrule, they ritualize that process, and they would seek out their successors so that they can control, to a degree, how the sages came to be, so they could avoid, something like Sulcaris. But Demoko didn't do that. So, well, the thing is, he tried, but he himself so poorly embodied his principles, he couldn't pass them on to Lear. I wouldn't say she embodies them either. That's why Tetra got it. I probably confused people, so I'll end that there, I guess.
Demoko is a shitty sage.
Yeah. The thing is, he brought in change to the world, so he did initially properly embody time. But he became static. So, yeah, anyway, Tarma's haiku.
Actually, someone brought up an interesting idea the other day, and it could be fun since we're on the topic. So, You know how if you go back in time, Highlands, or I should say, Collins lived for a very long time, but they're at some point, their lifespans and thus perception of time
Accelerates.
drastically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that it's tied to the Moko's character and
Yes.
how? Yeah.
Space accelerates time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a symbolic concept. The more that space is defined, the faster time goes. Like, and it's the opposite in the other extreme when there's no space and you exist purely in time. Like, time is just, it's so all encompassing that it's almost like you don't even notice it, which is like the case for nomadic cultures.
Yeah.
Unless I'm getting that backwards. I might actually be getting that completely backwards. Let me look that up really quickly so I don't make a fool of myself, because I'm forgetting now. Let's see. Accelerates. Let me look that up. No, not time dilation. See, time devours space. Yes. Space. Yeah, space. No. Yeah, space fixes time. Actually, I think I had it opposite. When you. No, I think I had it right. My head.
Yeah, I was
basically creating structures and putting categories on everything fixes time. It almost causes it to stand still, which causes hyperacceleration. I think. I need to reread it again. My head hurts. And then the opposite is in the other extreme when there's no you basically exist purely in the margin. There's no center. You don't have any civilization. You're basically the ultimate nomad. It's the exact opposite. That's kind of the. I don't know. Could you correct me if I'm wrong?
Like, the more definitions put in place accelerates time.
Okay, yeah.
The more defined a reality is, the more the faster time accelerates. The less stuff in it, essentially, there's then that slows down time.
Okay, yeah. All right. I'll probably in like 2 weeks have another freaking live stream where I'm like, no, I was wrong about it all. This
good example of that. So everyone here has noticed this. The older you get, the faster time passes. There's a reason for that, because there's more definitions in your life. Yeah. You have more experience. You're aware of more things, so time passes more quickly. But when you were a child, you had less time, essentially. There were less definitions. So a day felt way longer when you were a kid. Now a day feels like a few hours, which it is. It's weird, and that's why time is all about how we experience it based on how many definitions there are.
Yep.
So the more stuff you add onto it, the more it accelerates. It's kind of like a sledge, really. The heavier a sledge is, the more stuff you put on a sledge, the faster it will accelerate.
Yep. Poor Demoko. Well, no, I don't feel sorry for him. I don't. As Jack Moran pointed out, because we mentioned earlier, if Neff cloned himself, he'd just give himself double the amount of work to do. You are absolutely correct. That's what would happen. Making a clone of me wouldn't make me go faster. I would just expand my capacity to do more and just add more.
Yeah.
And there you see the dark side of the garments of skin.
That's the problem. Like, if you take this in Hyrule Conquest, in the context of Hyrule Conquest, is the more defined the world is, the more stuff was defined in the world that sped up time. And as a result, the Moko was defining more things in the world himself, thus less embodying that a concept of time slowing down. But that's kind of how Tolkien saw it as well. The more defined the world becomes, the faster it accelerates.
Yeah.
And what is definition? Well, that's usually connected to the material, because you're inherently adding material stuff to the stuff. That's a lot of stuff.
Yep.
But I think the sledge analogy is like a very easy way to understand it. So the more weight you add onto a sledge, the more objects and material things you're adding to the weight, it will speed up. And I think that's a pretty good way to understand it.
All right,
So yeah, don't feel bad for Demok.
I've completely lost track of the chat, so I'm gonna scroll up from the end and see if I can find any more questions. See, Jack Moran says, so the closer to the margin you reside, the longer you live. Does that explain how the son of Harkinian lived for so long? If you are referring to the Harkinian that I'm thinking of, then yes, he lives on the extreme most margin of the world, and he does live for a very long time. Congratulations, you've seen the pattern. There is a pattern of marginal characters in Hyrule Conquest living for a very long time. This peace is what all true sages strive for.
Immortality bad. Bad.
Well, it depends on what you mean by immortality.
Physical immortality is bad. Spiritual is good.
Physical immortality, yeah, that is not. I don't recommend it.
Spiritual is ideal. If you truly want to experience immortality, then the spiritual is the way to go, because it doesn't damage your.
Well, I would actually argue it should be both, but I'm not sure there is a way. I'm not sure how to manifest the immortality of both.
I mean,
so to speak.
If you're a human being, you would first have to figure out how to not have an existential crisis when you reach the age of 200.
Because the problem with I hate.
But can you even imagine
terms,
that though?
but biological immortality. Can I imagine what?
No, but just imagine that fact now. So you're entering your early 30s. I'm in my late 20s, and how fast how we experience time now. Can you imagine that at 200? I don't know. I don't want to imagine that.
I almost feel like there would almost be like this threshold where it's just all a blur.
The problem is that we don't know what happens if you keep adding definitions to an existence.
I think Tolkien had it right. I think it's ultimately insanity.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that. Like, I firmly believe that I always say the day humans find a way to extend their material selves for hundreds of years, it's gonna be a tragedy. It's gonna be a disaster. It's gonna be a disaster for the people that extend themselves to that degree. They're going to get to a point where they're not even recognizable as human anymore, even to themselves.
I understand.
I know that might sound really pretentious and arrogant of me to make that claim, but I don't know.
Immortality in a vacuum is an enticing prospect, and I had this discussion with people before where they look at me and be like, "Are you crazy? Living forever would be the blast. I don't want to die." But the thing is, you are dying if you live forever.
Yeah. Actually, I recently, in that book I was talking about the garments of skin, and you can also correct me if this person's wrong, but ancient cultures, that's going to be like my catchphrase now, but in ancient cultures, what we in modernity define as life was not considered life to them. They saw humans almost as if they were like in a living death. Basically, people are already dead. They're only paying a story way to represent it is you're loaning something to the god of death to hold off your permanent demise for a bit longer. That's one way to see it narratively. Basically, the ancient idea of life is something we've completely forgotten about in modernity, and the kind of modern definition of life, which is like biological continuity, that is seen as like a living death to ancient cultures. That's why who are they? What was that? There's actually an expression we still use in modernity that hints at that. Like, I I think it's something like dying isn't death; it's release from death.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's something like that. I can't remember. Whatever. I'm just making myself sound like a fool now, but
I know
yeah.
what you're getting at. I know what you're getting at. I wouldn't say that's wrong, but there are definitely asterisks to that interpretation.
Probably.
And I think assuming maybe the thing is it's impossible to know for sure because our perception of life is inherently different from an ancient culture, and it would be very difficult for us to release ourselves of our own biases because we inherently because we are taught the biological definition of life from very early on, and that warps our kind of understanding of it. So it's very
Yeah.
difficult for us to understand. So it would be very difficult for us to understand a mentality where that is not present, right? That would
Yeah.
be very difficult. And
Um,
I guess you
all the
could
old
try to
peoples, they
interpret it
didn't have the same categories for biological life that we have now.
like they would have the basis of it, but the thing is, there's a lot of extra baggage that they wouldn't have, and it's difficult for us to imagine how we would, how we'd look at something like death without the baggage.
Yeah.
That's the problem, and this is actually something that Gert specifically says that the moment that you add baggage to something, it's very difficult to remove it. Uh, honestly, according to a lot of postmodernist theorists, the moment you add baggage to something, you can probably never ever take it off.
Unless
It's a
you
part of you.
experience it yourself.
Yeah, like the
Bloody
moment, for example,
postmodernists.
the moment that you are taught how the body functions, that you will never be able to completely rid yourself of that bias. That it's gonna,
You've added a garment of skin.
yeah, that is a part of you. Kind of, it's a part of you, and you can obviously. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, right? But it's important to acknowledge that you are forever corrupted, for the lack of a better term, by that baggage.
Yeah.
Uh,
Stop trying to convert me to postmodernism.
no,
It's
but
work.
it's a good example. It's a good example of that. Okay, so let's say we had a conversation with an ancient person. It doesn't really matter what culture they're from, right?
Yeah.
And we were going to talk about the sky. It would be very difficult for us to understand their understanding of that concept because we are already biased by our modern understanding of what a sky is.
Yeah.
We could try
We'd be
to
talking
insert
about two
ourselves.
completely different things other than the image
Yeah.
of it. And even our image of
Likewise.
it is
Yeah.
corrupted.
Likewise, they would have a difficult time understanding our perspective. I do think it's I'm more I'm more of a positivist when it comes to this. So I think you can still learn, but you will always carry the bias with you. But you can get closer to that common perception. Let's take this ancient person. We wouldn't be able to completely understand each other. He could try to teach us what the sky is to him, and we would have a higher understanding of it. But at the end of the day, you still have your own kind of understanding of the sky. And we could try to teach him, but he would probably still have his own understanding of it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes this entire thing very difficult, because that means that we can never ever know for sure how things are. I think that's the tragedy of it, really. But I think it's also just something you kind of have to acknowledge. That's just how humans work.
I kind of agree with you. And the thing is, the reason I kind of agree with you, especially because of the example you brought up, is that ancient person is dead.
Yeah.
So any attempt to connect with the dead is like necromancy. Which is why I suspect history might be the solution to that, but even history is corrupted by the politics of the time that it's put down to the page. So even history is kind of a wishy-washy solution to that problem.
The thing is, there's an expression in the region that basically it translates to you can acknowledge something, but it's not the acknowledgement you go to bed with. And that's basically let's say you are the ancient person. I can teach you, or you can teach me about how you consider the sky in your culture and your time period, right? And I would be able to learn something from your perspective. But ultimately, when I go to bed, I still leave with my perception of that concept. If I'm making any sense, right?
I think so.
So, okay, so imagine you're even more modern. You have a flat Earth theorist, right? And let's say you manage to convince that that flat Earth theorist that Earth is in fact round. If his biases are great enough, whenever he leaves that conversation and he goes home that day, he probably will still think the Earth is flat.
Well, my answer
Even
to
though,
that is the Earth is flat 90% of the time.
well, yeah. The point is that the point is even when you learn something, your inherent biases are so powerful that you will never be able to rid yourself of them, even if you learn about something else.
So Gnosticism is the answer.
No, it's not.
Transcend your biases.
Again, I saw someone in the chat quickly so that I'm making sense. So, they asked Nephystream noob, what is postmodernism in short explanation? The lack of right and wrong. The thing is, postmodernism is kind of complicated, and I do see it all the time that people have like a very wrong understanding of it. But basically, in an academic sense, it's a sort of an approach to evidence, or should I say, lack of evidence. And it's about acknowledging how our perception of reality is inherently subjective, and makes it difficult to know for sure that something is subjective. It doesn't necessarily say it's impossible. It just says it's difficult, and it's very important that we acknowledge the challenges of that.
That is a very dangerous way of thinking in the wrong hands. But
it's very dangerous.
But as I talked to you the other day, I do think modernism's even more dangerous. I think modernism's even more dangerous than postmodernism.
For example, all the symbolism that we're talking about is very postmodernistic, because we have an idea of how past mentalities might have experienced these concepts, but we don't know for sure, right? It's very subject to our interpretation of those things. So ultimately, when we think we have reached a sort of objective truth, the reality is we don't know for sure if that's the case. However, postmodernism is more optimistic about that, and according to postmodernism, due to the challenges, the only way to gain knowledge about things that you can't be sure about is to interpret, reevaluate, or as Gertz puts it, educated guesswork, right? Until you get closer to some sort of objectivity. While modernism would say that it's kind of pointless, because at the end of the day, it's all subject to personal interpretation, which is not fact.
I almost feel like modernism is like, this is probably going to offend a lot of modernists, and I don't really mean this in an offensive way, but modernism is almost like autism. It's like mental tyranny almost. Whereas postmodernism is like, I don't know. I can't help but see the danger in postmodernism, but I think it's better than modernism.
I think both are dangerous, and I do think both have their use. I think they become dangerous when you lean too much in one direction. Like, it's not, let's say in an academic context, it's not productive to just say, well, we can't know anything for sure, so what's the point, right? That's obviously not that's pretty dangerous. And it's very important to treat postmodernism more as an acknowledgement of the state of things rather than an absolute truth. I think that is
the negative I've seen come out of postmodernism, which I think I talked to you about already, is because there's this ideology that your subjective interpretation corrupts or influences the facts, which
Yeah.
I do think is true. So right there, I'm on board with that ideology. The problem is it seems like people use that as a weapon to impose their biased perception of the world as fact. And
Which
they
is
do it by basically deconstructing language and kind of in like a sneaky kind of, they basically play a language game to confuse people, and they basically trick people into their personal subjective corrupted perception of the world, which
Yeah.
I think is incredibly dangerous. Which, that is the one thing about modernism that's a bit more positive, is they're so unsubtle about it that you know that's what they're doing right from the get-go. There's
Yeah.
no sneakiness. The modernists are like, no, I'm imposing all my perspective on you. These are the facts.
Yeah.
It's basically brutally honest to the point where they don't even realize it. Whereas postmodernism, there's almost a deceptive and underhanded potential in it that I find kind of disgusting.
The thing is, modernist again, and this was brought up in the conversation that postmodernism is not always useful is in certain contexts, like in the natural sciences, right? In the natural science, here I would argue it does have a role, but not as big of a role, because but anyways, because in the natural sciences you can always fact check stuff through data. The problem is
would you agree with me that modernism is symbolically masculine and postmodernism is symbolically feminine?
Yeah, I would,
Okay.
because while modernism is based on rigidness and order, postmodernism is inherently chaotic.
It's question, basically.
Yeah.
It's Earth. It's question. It's the okay. So then the solution is the marriage of the two.
Yeah. Because
Thank you, ancient cultures who died. You have the answers for us.
but even then, like, again, saying postmodernism is, or a postmodernistic approach is completely, useless in the natural science, I would say is wrong, because humans are inherently flawed, and even when dealing with numbers we do mistakes without even realizing it, like selectively looking for data that might support our own agenda, which happens all the time. Even if we have all the data available, we don't know if the people interpreting that data are being objective. That is because again, humans are flawed. But I would say that the most healthy approach to postmodernism is to see it as acknowledgement. And like you said, when you use it as a weapon, that is ironically that's going against postmodernism, right? Because you're taking your own corrupted biases, a subjective perspective, and you're presenting it as fact, which is like, that is obviously that is not postmodernistic at all. Like, if you see scholars that operate in a postmodernistic sort of sphere in terms of their methodology, they always acknowledge, this is my interpretation, but it's an interpretation based on this and this and this. And that's very important, right? Because you don't present it as fact, you do present it as a personal interpretation with a foot in reality, essentially. So there's a difference between, and when I hear people disregard postmodernism because, it's just interpretation, it's not just interpretation, it's an interpretation based on, it has a basis in the real world. For example, I can, based on various sources, I can, interpret that a certain symbol has had a certain meaning for a culture based on this and this and this, right?
It's not just pulled out of your ass, basically.
Yeah, it's not something.
There is embodiment in the earth. It's not all purely abstract.
However, if I said this symbol represents fucking poodles, right? because I feel like
Because you
that's correct. That's obviously not
see
gonna be
that
correct.
that is where I feel like that's what I feel like people are doing with that ideology is what you just illustrated there. Like I feel poodles are right, therefore they are because it's my subjective interpretation. It basically becomes a power play. It's an exercise of power at that point because that's the only thing. If you get to the point where there isn't a common underlying structure of facts or that dreaded word objectivity, and everyone is approaching the truth from their own phenomenological experience, which that's the part I actually agree with. I think there's no way to escape that because we're in phenomenon. But when you bring that to its extreme, it becomes all of the individual personal experiences fighting each other for dominance, basically, to
Yeah.
assert itself as truth. So it's democracy, basically.
The thing is, the problem with honestly, there's a huge issue with I really don't like postmodernism and modernism as terminologies.
No,
Because
I don't think they're. I agree. I think one, they're both incredibly arrogant labels, both of them.
and also there are too many different like understanding of it. Like modernism in art is not the same as modernism in the humanities, but they share the same terminology, which confuses people.
I also
Postmodernistic art
think
is
those patterns of thinking have most likely played out throughout all of history too. I don't think they're actually modern and postmodern.
no, they're not. It's just that that's when they had. We talk about the postmodernistic turn in the 80s, for example, in history, but it's not like that was the first time postmodernistic thinking was ever deployed when interpreting history, right? It's just that when it became popular.
Popular in the current culture.
Yeah, but it's not obviously thinking that reality is subjective is not a new idea, right? That arose a few decades ago. It's like that's kind of silly.
I've already expressed, I guess, my personal opinion, but I don't think reality in and of itself is subjective. I think humans are stuck looking at it from their phenomenological point of view. Basically, it's like
There are disagreements in postmodernism because some postmodernists would say that there might be an objective reality, but because we are inherently subjective, we all experience different.
That's much closer to my worldview.
Yeah. So
I'm seeing people in that line of thinking just outright dismissing any possibility of objectivity, which I think is very dangerous.
To simplify it, so you have one school of thought that would align with what you're thinking, and would say that let's basically imagine reality a classroom of art students, right?
Yeah.
And they're all told to paint this a fruit basket. The fruit basket is there, and that's objective reality.
Yes.
But we're all painting the fruit basket, and it's all slightly different. So then we have maybe 20 different interpretations of said reality or the fruit basket.
That is Plato's. That's Plato.
And then you have
Plato the postmodernists.
And then you have another school of postmodernism where there is no fruit basket, and everyone is trying.
That's the one I don't agree with.
Yeah. And
I guess so. I guess just if you add Plato to postmodernism, you kind of have my worldview.
Yeah. But however, the latter school would argue that, and honestly, it's a sound argument. My problem is how useful is it, right? And their counter argument to that criticism would be, well, if everyone has their own drawing, right? How could we even know what the true fruit basket is?
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not a bad argument, but again, I ask, what's the usefulness of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the answer is to experience the fruit basket, and then you'll get something of it.
But like I don't think it's a bad argument, because I think they're onto something. It's just, to me, postmodernism has always been a means to an end, because I want to learn about stuff there is no evidence of, so, or not a lot of evidence for, right? So then I have to deploy or employ certain methods to reach some sort of objective truth, if but I think it, because basically when I say I'm a postmodernist, it's more that I employ postmodernistic theory in research rather than something that some sort of doctrine or philosophical doctrine that I live by. I think that's the difference.
Well, maybe one day we'll see the two rejoin each other before Aquinas split them apart. Yeah, I think we've gone. I mean, I guess this is technically related to Hyrule Conquest, but we have probably gone way off topic as usual. But I don't know. I like talking about modernism and postmodernism because I think that kind of interplay between them right now is, I don't know, an issue with modernity. But
soon we will get postmodernism,
which will just be medievalism.
No, Vanker actually posted a video, I think it was yesterday, that kind of illustrated, like, you have modernism, then postmodernism, and then postmodernism is just the traumatized modernism killing itself. That's
it's modernism killing itself.
Yeah, I see. I need to see if I can find a video so you can see it.
So it'd basically be the return to medieval thinking. It's funny because I'm noticing that pattern in the scientific community. I was reading. I actually think it was in the Buffalo Discord the other day. I think it was Loopy that posted it. It was some article on quantum physics, and they were talking about how when a rock falls on a mountain, does it become a mountain or do they remain separate objects? And they're using language that's it's the logos in Western theology. Like everything exists as a unity and a multiplicity at the same time. It's like these ancient, mud farmers were talking about this stuff at least 3,000 years ago, and it's just hilarious. It's like it's going in endless circles. And you see this thing in the cybernetic community where they're like, okay, well, this whole consciousness thing, it seems like everything in the world at some basic level has something akin to a spirit. So it's like, okay, well, they've destroyed the spiritual world and now they're restarting at animism again. They're restarting at the bottom level where they're acknowledging, okay, everything in the cosmos seems to have an abstract element to it. Everything has spirit, like animism, and if they keep going, they're going to be like, oh, there's higher forms of that. They'll work their way back up to paganism. It's like this endless cycle. It's really funny to me.
The thing is, when talking about the patterns, symbolic patterns of past cultures, just that idea is postmodernistic, because there's no concrete evidence that, was a shared pattern at all, right? It's our interpretation of, or educated guesswork on similar reoccurring things, but at the end of the day, it's still an interpretation.
Oh, fair enough. Bloody postmodernist. I see some more questions. Didn't Demoko turn into a tree after his apparent death? Maybe that was a measure to try and keep himself alive. I think the tree says something a bit more about Majora than Demoko. I think the tree is more related to the part Majora seems to play in that particular cosmos. What the hell is modernism? I don't know if we actually really explained modernism in our little tangent there. Number name asked, what the hell is modernism?
Just no. I'll. If you guys don't want to hear my long-winded explanation, especially now that I'm tired, just search postmodernism on YouTube, and there's a very funny sketch video you can watch. Kind of explains it.
Modernism is kind of an ideology. I don't know if ideology is the word I'd use, but it kind of rose in the late 1800s. and became really popular in the early 1900s. And it's connected to hyper rationality. It's connected to science, and I don't know if I can really flesh it out, but it led to World War II. It led to both World Wars. And it ruined everything. Nah, I'm just being silly now. But modernism. Okay, modernism is basically an attempt to categorize everything in a clear and objective way. I think that is that a fair way to sum it up.
Yeah, I would say it's a philosophical approach to truth and objectivity and what purpose that serves. I would say that's the simplest way.
Yeah.
It's inherently tied to objectivity and what that represents. While postmodernism is, again, in short terms, more about the subjectivity of everything, and more individualistic in its approach.
Both are incredibly dangerous, but
Yeah,
I suspect like that's humans. There's no way to.
we're gonna weaponize
We're gonna weaponize
every
everything. um. I feel like I would rather live in a postmodernist culture, but that's easy for me to say because we've seen the scale to which modernism can destroy the world. We haven't really seen postmodernism at its most extremely weaponized yet, and it could be even worse. I don't know.
I mean, according to some, we are currently living in a postmodernist world. So.
No, I do think I actually think it's a battle between the two right now. But as far as like the layman, like the average person, I do think a lot of people think in postmodernist. Yeah, I think I would say the world is more postmodern now than modern. So I forgot what the hell I was saying now.
No, a good example of that, the perception of gender and how we identify gender and all that socially. That's a very postmodern thing.
Yeah, I agree. That's all coming out of postmodernism thinking. My answer to that is yes, of course it can manifest in different levels, but they're still male and female. Those two still exist in an objective way. Obviously, they do not like in Plato's forms. They obviously don't completely manifest in their ideals in the world, always, but they still exist.
Yeah.
That's my retort to both the modernists and the postmodernists. Like even if you look in symbolism, like the church is feminine in its relationship to like God. So if you're a church, if you're part of the church, you are feminine in that relationship, even if you're a man. But you're still a man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the. I don't know. I feel like all these people are like autistic. It's like I don't think it's complicated to like resolve this problem. I don't know. I'm gonna get off the modernism and postmodernism topic because I feel like I'm just gonna rant. Let's see. Wizro, Volga, and Saya, will they appear in Hyrule Conquest soon? All three of them have already played major roles in Hyrule Conquest. More so Volga and Saya. Wizro hasn't really done much, but all three of them have shown up already. Let's see. Well, who the F did Demoko bang then? No one? Demoko didn't have offspring in that sense? I mean, the Oka are his children to some degree. Not in a biological sense, more in a symbolic sense. Gelber Bastard asks, "What's the topic?" I honestly don't know what it is anymore.
Topic is whatever we decided to.
Let's
The
see.
best topic.
What about the fact that the Librinian army uses females as cheap cannon fodder instead of using them for giving a life, giving I presume you mean life of more potential soldiers. You are onto something. I don't think it's surprising that Labrina, with their ideology, is using the feminine and weaponizing it. I think there's definitely something there, and it's definitely symbolic of their fall. Because yeah, without the feminine light, that's why historically most soldiers or men, because let's say you get into a huge war, let's say you have a female army, you're like some ancient culture, you have a female army and you get into a war with your neighbors and all of those women die and there's only a few women left and you need to repopulate your culture. Well, now you have tons of men and no women, or very few women, and it's going to take forever, a very long time to repopulate your entire culture. Your culture is probably going to die. Whereas historically, that's why men were traditionally only used as soldiers, because frankly, men are expendable. Thousands of men can die. And if there's one man, that's the symbolism behind the Gerudo. Like, even if there's one man left, he can hypothetically completely repopulate your entire culture. Like that's why, like, that's oddly enough, that's a material answer for me. It's like a really material answer.
I think I talked about this before, but it's not a matter of if women are less capable as soldiers or not as men. That's completely irrelevant. The reason why fewer women and why women rarely are deployed as soldiers in conflict is because women, especially in quotation mark archaic cultures, are a commodity.
Oh, now we're gonna get kicked off of YouTube.
No, but it's true, because they are valuable and more valuable than men. Like, women are a more valuable resource to a culture than men. So
because the culture dies without them. So
what do you do? What do you do with valuable assets? You don't waste them, right? It's pretty evident, and like you said, men are expendable. That's just the reality of it.
So
in a culture that seeks to sustain itself, that is. Obviously, in a modern context, that would be different, but we're talking from in this kind of a medieval standpoint.
Yeah, so there's definitely a connection between Labrina's cultural death and the fact that they're throwing away the lives of their women in war. It should be no surprise they have a lot of issues when that war ends and their culture gets absorbed by another one, or absorbed into another one. Yeah, I also don't think it's surprising that the two principals, at least apparent principals, leading Labrina, they're both women, Varen and Ambi, and both of them have had the masculine component of their life destroyed. There's so much symbolism going on there, it hurts my brain. And they're building the Black Tower. Like I said in one of these live streams weeks ago, it's a masculine symbol. The masculine part of them has died, and they're trying to manifest it again, but they can't because they're missing the heavenly component. It's tragic. It really is tragic. But that does happen.
I just want to answer quick because it was kind of related. Lord of Creation, you said I hate how they viewed females in that era, and here's the thing: that is very easy to say from a modern perspective because we are not tied to those same biological axioms as they were. They didn't. The thing is, females or women weren't given that role because there were some malicious old farts that wanted to fuck over women. It's just kind of principle of how you protect valuable assets to your in your culture.
They had to, or they would die.
Yeah,
It's that simple. It's that simple.
It's not a matter of. The thing is, obviously, from moral standards,
all
because,
humans
again,
would have died. Like, now we have this.
We have the luxury as a modern culture to take a step back and see, or experience a world where those practices are not necessary. But past cultures did not have that luxury.
They didn't have contraception. They didn't have machines that could fight wars for them to the degree we have now. It really is that simple. The way male and female have manifested themselves over the last 2,000 years is because if they didn't, all humans would be dead right now. Like, it's that simple.
Even in
it's
royalty,
that simple,
say,
really.
Even in royalty, I have to, and even in royalty, women were just a luxury item to be traded to gain power. That's just kind of how it was. Because giving your daughter to a rival family and marry her off, I know it's dehumanizing, but to understand the processes behind it, you kind of have to do it. In that context, she's not even a person. She's a valuable commodity traded for loyalty and support. That's usually what the role women in royalty and nobility were given. They were commodities to be sold off in exchange for loyalty, troops, or whatever it be.
We're probably starting a firestorm. We're gonna get kicked off YouTube.
I mean, I understand that, these things are annoying, but it's kind of just, the reality of things.
King of Spoons 64 actually pointed out something interesting. He says, in this case, Labrina isn't weaponizing femininity, they are rejecting it. Yes, they're basically turning women into men. Symbolically. Obviously not literally biologically, but they technically are not weaponizing it. They're hyper masculine, basically. Labrina is hyper masculine, and then the fairies are actually the opposite. They're utterly feminine, which is why all the fairies manifest as female. I suspect if you weaponized femininity, it would manifest something like nature reclaiming the earth, something like that. So yeah, I think King of Spoons is right on the money there. Labrina isn't. They're not weaponizing femininity. they're trying to create men, basically, because they've lost that masculine aspect to them, which is really tragic. Yeah, I'm gonna get kicked off YouTube.
No, probably not.
Doesn't Hyrule use females in their army too? Not as their soldiers. They have the light arrow archers, which is more like a ceremonial kind of thing. And in a lot of ancient cultures, women generally were taught how to defend themselves. I mean, I think that's really evident in like Japanese culture, but they weren't sent on the front lines to get fucking killed in a war. Because if they did, well, now we can't repopulate our culture.
Here's the thing, I like war because it's cool, but war is also fucking terrible. I never actually understood why our modern culture glorifies the soldier or warrior. It's not a fucking good thing to glorify. They're cannon fodder.
Yeah.
Like, why don't glorify cannon fodder, guys? That's terrible. Like, here's the thing, that's soldiers sent on the battlefield to fucking die because they were expendable. I don't think that's a nice thing to glorify at all. I think that's kind of terrible, actually. It's like, yeah, like you said, men were sent off to die because they were expendable. Like, here's the thing, if men were the ones that biologically gave birth, the roles would have been reversed.
Yeah.
If it was the other way around, they were ruled by their biological axioms. It's just, yeah, it sucks, but what can you do?
Let's see what other questions we got.
make test tubes or something, I guess.
See, females in armies is wrong. It's just a nerd's dream. Amazon warriors are just fantasy. I would say a large standing female army is dangerous for a culture. Obviously, sometimes there are situations where that would be valuable, like say all the men died and your enemies are about to destroy you. You probably want all of your women to be able to mount a defense. So and yeah, the whole Amazon culture is supposed to represent a culture on the margins in sort of the Greek worldview. Yeah, I don't be surprised if YouTube kicks me off in the next few days. I'm saying things that are not really looked on fondly in modern culture.
No,
I understand why it's this disconnect between now and ancient.
No, I don't necessarily disagree, but I don't think we agree on due to the same thing. I kind of want to take that statement and pick it apart, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. The thing is, first of all, while there is certainly, there's certainly the idea that men are biologically stronger than females on average is certainly true. That doesn't necessarily equal a better soldier. First of all, you need to define what the soldier's role is. And I would say in a modern setting, it's not really that big of a deal. Women have their place in modern armies, and we're not as ruled by the limits as ancient cultures were. They're not really related. And besides, a full female standing army in an ancient culture probably wouldn't be a good idea for the reasons we've been talking about. However, a female warrior, if she was capable and she had a role, it's not a problem, really. It's not an issue. The issue is when you're sending a huge chunk of your female population out to die. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Women being on the battlefield is not a problem. It's just them dying on the battlefield that is the problem.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of historical examples of particular exceptional women that participated in warfare, but the key word is exceptional. Again, I'm gonna get kicked off of YouTube, so it was fun, guys. It was fun being on YouTube for all these years. Let's see. This person says, I guess the Gelber bastard guy, soy boy nerds with less masculinity need these masculine female warriors to counterpart their lack of masculinity, especially in games. I definitely think there is something to that. I have said some very negative things about the soy boy stereotype. I think it's very unhealthy for culture to give into that soy boy mentality. Oh my god, I'm probably making so many enemies right now.
I think I'm not sure if that might be it. I think it's more of because I see this in history all the time, where people are actively looking for female Vikings, for example, all the time, and it's not really. Here's the thing: they might have existed, but again, exceptional circumstances. The thing is, I think it's more of a wish fulfillment because of I think we live in a culture where we're trying currently, because we're in a position to do so, to question how how dependent we are on our biological designated roles, like man and woman, and what biological functions we have. We have the luxury to take a step back and actually evaluate what that means.
Courtesy of the garments of skin.
Yeah, and I do think there's a certain wish fulfillment that, because we do have that luxury to look at ancient cultures and be like, oh, it would be so cool if there were female warriors. And I don't think that necessarily tied to being a soy boy or whatever. I think that's more about, we have the luxury to imagine that as a thing because it's possible now, right? And reality, I know people say that, reality is always more fantastical than fiction. I don't agree on that at all. I do like history, but, it's not fiction
History
at
is more fucked up than fantasy.
all. Yeah, but I would say that
It's like if you look at the War of Roses and compare it to Game of Thrones, the War of Roses is even more fucked up than Game of Thrones. Some of the things
Yeah.
that happened.
for me, I think the idea of female warriors is more about wish fulfillment and trying to insert an ideal in our modern society in the past without considering the limitations that the past had.
So it's a form of necromancy.
Yeah. The thing is, here's the thing: if we look aside, we look aside from the biological limitations. Nothing wrong with female warriors at all. It's absolutely no problem. It's just that it probably didn't happen, and there's the reason why it didn't happen is not because of oppression or anything. It's more because, again, like I said, women were valuable, and you don't want to, throw away your valuables. It's like how if you have two swords, one is like a gilded, very elaborate, inscribed gift sword, and then you have your standard sidearm. You're gonna take your standard iron sidearm into battle. You're not gonna take your pretty valuable item, right? It's the same kind of principle. You don't.
All the accusations of chauvinism.
Hmm?
Nothing. I wouldn't be surprised if we get taken off of YouTube. No, I agree with you completely.
Just
And
1v1 me YouTube.
Well, yeah, this is technically my channel, not yours, so I'll get taken off YouTube. Let's see if I can find any more questions. Are the first sages virgins? Yes and no. Depends on what you mean by that. The first sages are kind of... I don't know how to answer this one in a satisfying way, other than yes and no. They are, but probably not in the way that you're thinking. I think someone actually asked that question in a past live stream, like ages ago. I feel like that question's been asked. I don't remember. I don't know. Anyway, let's see what other questions we've got. See, the worst part, this isn't really a question, but the worst part about glorifying modern soldiers is that they are professional soldiers, essentially mercenaries, not citizen soldiers who fight for their homes, not a paycheck. I guess it depends on where in the world you are. There are some very nationalistic armies in the world, like South Korea and Israel, I would say. Although military service is mandatory in those two countries. I don't know what my perspective on the glorification of soldiers are. I definitely think glorifying soldiers and warriors is a pagan concept. I think that is a remnant of the pagan world that hasn't gone away. Which means there's probably some truth to it if it won't go away, but I don't have a strong opinion on how. I know you seemed like Deox, you were kind of going on about how, like, why are you glorifying soldiers? I don't know if I have a strong opinion on that at the moment.
Honestly, I'll probably rephrase. I really don't care. What I meant is I just think it's kind of weird, really, because the intent behind sending warriors is not for any glorious purpose. It's more like some asshole with power is sending out expendable people so that he can win his political game.
I suspect, this is entirely theoretical on my part, but I suspect it is our culture's desire to serve a principle manifesting in a strange way, because militaries and armies are one of the few things left in modernity where there's that liturgy of, like, serving a higher principle. You go through rituals and education to learn a role and be part in a mechanism. Do you think I'm on anything there or no?
Could you rephrase that? I spaced out.
Okay, part of humans, and this is gonna sound weird to modern people too, but part of being human is finding someone to submit yourself to. Something.
Oh yeah.
And my theory is militaries are one of the last things in the modern world where it still has that structure of like this it has like a principle at the top. It has this liturgical structure where you go through rituals, and it's almost like a church in a way. Um I suspect the kind of glorification of cannon fodder is it might be that desire to serve a higher principle, and
Yeah,
they're worshiping the cannon fodder, or making an idol of the cannon fodder that is part of a principle that they themselves lack. My
no, I
anything? Do you think
no,
I'm
I
onto
agree.
something?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's pretty much what I. Yeah, that's what I think as well. I
I
think that's
suspect
why
it's something like that because we don't
I
have any
still.
institutions like that anymore. The military is like one of the last ones. Even well, we had the universities, and those are basically dead now.
Thing is,
Those are dead now.
I definitely, yeah, I definitely understand why it's done. But I still think it's odd because it's like you are willingly choosing to ignore the actual context of what's going on, but it makes sense about submission, right? So I get that part. I still think it's weird though because first thing that should come to mind when you've drafted a son of the war is they're probably gonna die, especially in an old, medieval context.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I definitely agree. I do think it's about submission and living for something bigger than yourself, uh, or choosing to die for something greater than yourself. I definitely think that's a part of it.
Let's see. Tin Lee asks, I don't know if you've talked about them, but what is the ideology behind Icona, or what do they represent in our culture? Death. Submission to death. In a, not in the same way as like the Stalfos, though. It's more like the Iconians are aware of their submission because they're not, because the Stalfos obviously is more connected to things like necromancy, like projecting yourself into the past, whereas Icona, they submitted themselves to death in a kind of voluntary way. So, yeah. Um, Hopefully that answers that question. I don't know if it actually does. Let's see. I think the Iconians are Roman or Egyptian themed cultures, correct? I would probably say Iconians are closer to Mesopotamian cultures,
Yeah,
like Sumeria or Sumerian, Acadia, Babylonian, Assyrian. Well, not maybe not so much Babylonian and Assyrian. I actually see the Gerudo as more Babylonian and Assyrian. I kind of are even older than that in terms of like how I concept like their aesthetics and stuff. Oh yeah. um, I probably wouldn't say the Iconians are Egyptian. Um, let's see. Isn't that let's see. Captain Hekia asked, "Isn't that the exact same subject that caused a religion war in one of your comment sections on one of your trailers?" I was not aware of a religion war in the comments of one of my trailers. If someone can tell me what trailer that is, I'll go look at the comment
I'm not
war.
sure about
I've
religion war,
not
but
seen that.
I know the topic of female soldier has sparked like a lot of flame wars.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. Like that doesn't surprise me at all. That's a subject that is really hard to talk about in modernity, so that doesn't surprise me if there's a huge flame war over that topic in my comments, but I don't think I've noticed it.
I
Let's
mean,
see. What other?
at least you didn't paint a huge target on yourself.
I probably said some things today that'll it'll probably I don't know, probably make people either respect me more and other people not respect me. I probably categorized myself today. Uh, let's see. Hey, Undying Nephilim, what is your thoughts on the Darkspawn of Dragon Age? I have actually never played Dragon Age. I remember when the first Dragon Age game came out, I wanted to play it, and I had planned on getting it, and I just never got it. And then I remember the second one came out and everyone said it was the most god awful thing ever made, which was probably an exaggeration, but I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna invest myself in this thing if its sequel already goes off the rails. So I know very little about Dragon Age other than Kate Milgrew did a voice in it. That's literally all I know about it. So I can't really answer that question. Also, whoops, I just was reading a question and I scrolled down, it zoomed away. Let me scroll back up. Okay, there's the Icona ideology question, so somewhere around her here. There's the Dark Spawn question, I think. Yeah, are you saying any questions? I think I might have gotten to the end of the questions. Oh, so Iconian are like the Necrons, yes. I would draw a parallel between Iconians and the Necrons. They've willingly and voluntarily submitted themselves to something related to death and decay. Well, the Necrons I actually think are what we're talking about earlier. They're the garments of skin brought to their ultimate. They're like Sauron. Like, they literally cannot survive without their garments of skin, which are their robot bodies. So
Yeah.
that the Necrons are like anything that conjures the image of like artificial bodies, especially replacing your biological body with an artificial body. That's all related to the garments of skin. Which is why I'm kind of horrified by the last episode of the new Star Trek show where Picard dies and they turn him into a robot. That's a really that's a really bizarre message even for Star Trek.
I saw someone, I think it was Wispy Whiskers, that said, that the first thing the military teaches you how to survive, and I think that was kind of directed at what I said, that cannon fodder, right?
Yeah.
But I just want to elaborate that. First of all, I agree. I've seen some people discuss it. Modern armies are obviously different from past ones. I just want to make that clear that they are different. Again, because we're not as tied to the same limitations as the past cultures were. But another thing I would like to stress, though, obviously when I say cannon fodder, any person in power that had a standing army obviously wouldn't want their army to all die, right? Like, if they survive, that's better, because resupplying your army is expensive.
Yeah.
So you don't want your soldiers to die, but ultimately were expendable because the person in power is still sending people out. Yeah, the people in power is still sending people out with the knowledge that they might die, right?
Yeah.
Actually, and even then, I would say modern armies, you still kind of expendable, because you're still going out to a conflict and not the person that made the decision themselves.
But you're part of a principle if you're in an army.
Yeah, you're part of a principle.
You're an extension of that body.
Any country, I think it's any country wouldn't, they would obviously teach the soldiers how to survive, because again, it's expensive. But I think it would be maybe I'm just a pessimist, but I do think it would be kind of naive to assume that the reason they teach you how to survive is because they care about you as an individual. I don't think that's necessarily true. You're just a number on a page in that context. And I don't think that's because they're malicious or anything. That's just kind of how it is when you're dealing. Humans we are very limited in having emotional attachment to a lot of people, So, but I do. It's something to consider, though. Ultimately, war sucks.
Yeah. War itself is a garment of skin.
Regardless of context, it sucks ass. Even when you're fighting a defensive war, it's quite likely that the attack on your nation was maybe initiated by some poor decisions of people on top, right?
Yeah.
Like, war sucks for everyone, even if you're the one being attacked or the attacker. And ultimately, we're
That
That's
is
it.
why Tolkien did everything he could to not glorify war. Which I
Yeah,
guess the movies kind of failed at a little bit. They kind of glorify the
they
the
kind of did.
conflict a little bit. If you read like through Lord of the Rings, every time there's like a fight, it's basically they fight and then he just moves on to the next thing and he says, "Oh, it was terrible." It really doesn't go into detail about the actual physical conflict, whereas in the Lord of the Rings movie, like Helm's Deep is half the movie. But Tolkien was also a man who had the hell shelled out of him in France, so he has personal experience fighting in a war. So if anything, I understand why a modern person might, want to glorify, like, they don't have the experience. Which kind of leads to this next question, but not exactly. But so do you love Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead? I guess I'll start with The Walking Dead. I was kind of forced to watch the first, I think, 3 or 4 seasons against my will, and it was okay. I don't really hate The Walking Dead, but it didn't keep my interest. Game of Thrones, on the other hand, I kind of love right now. I just started rewatching the first season 2 days ago, and I had ordered the books, but they're not here yet. I do love Game of Thrones, but I have a little asterisk point, or there is something off about it that I can't quite get into, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I suspect the reason I don't fully embrace Game of Thrones is because I probably do have a different worldview than the author that I can't really reconcile with. But I I do agree with what he's trying to do. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I would say it does.
I really like the kind of Shakespearean tone of Game of Thrones. I like the fact that it's basically a giant tragedy, and the point of it is to learn from the horrible mistakes of these terrible people. And I didn't catch it the first time I watched the show, but I mean, the thing I'm about to say I did catch, but every time a character dies in Game of Thrones, because everyone would go off on about how, like, oh, characters can just randomly die and it's all arbitrary, and I'm like, no. Every time a character breaks their moral code in Game of Thrones, they're condemned to death. And I missed this the first time I watched it, but when Ned Stark is writing the will of Baratheon, and he says, to give the throne to his son, and he puts rightful heir, he makes that mistake, and he dies right after that. He finally breaks his moral code, and he dies. So there's like this weird kind of like cosmic justice actually going on in the show that I actually really appreciate. That I don't know if it was intentional on the part of the author or not. I don't know, Deox, you're more deep into the Game of Thrones stuff.
Yeah,
Maybe you have something to add
in
to
the
that.
case of I guess the thing with Eddard is, and in that case, it kind of makes the thing complicated. Is that because he's not, he writes the rightful heir instead of, my son in the will, because it's a problem because he wants to be honorable and obviously fulfill the wishes of his friend, but he also has to acknowledge that his son, Robert's son, is not the rightful heir.
But
right?
he could have told him, and then it could have been done properly. But he finally slipped up and was a little bit dishonorable, and then 24 hours after that, off goes his head. And it's like that for pretty much every character that dies, even his son. Like, he betrayed the phrase. Of course he was gonna die. I don't understand this like I don't know, maybe it's just the normies, but this like, oh, any character can just randomly die. And I'm like, no, every character does something that foreshadows their death. And it's always tied to them breaking their own moral code in some way.
The show did add a few deaths that are very random, and it's very clear that those deaths were not in the book.
I'm guessing how come I can't remember? Yeah.
Barristan, for example, is like very super. I think he will die in the books, but it's probably gonna be more of a You're not gonna be in an alleyway stabbed by some dude. Uh, but yeah, I think whenever a character dies, it's not. There are some random deaths because thing is, you can die at random, but usually there's a reason for it. Like for example, Rob, breaking his oath to the phrase, right? That it's like it's fucked up and it's sad, but he kind of had it coming.
Yeah, like
Characters point out
it's
that all the
obvious.
time.
I'm like,
Characters pointed out like the red wedding is not very surprising. Like
no, it's not.
That shit is not going to go well at all.
Maybe people just don't read Shakespeare, and I'm not even a person who really likes Shakespeare that much. But Shakespeare is all about foreshadowing. Like, as soon as he worked with the three witches, like, of course, like, ugh. Sorry, I don't want to go off on a Shakespeare, but I do suspect George R. R. Martin probably really likes Shakespeare.
I mean,
that was right after the War of the Roses.
I mean, it's not even a Shakespearean thing. It's
Greek.
It's very historical. Yeah, it's historical as well.
Irish, as my fiance always goes on about in Irish stories, everyone dies. The end. Every Irish mythology story ends with everyone dying. The end.
It's more ironic in the books.
They survive for thousands of years, and then they convert to Christianity and immediately die.
And then they die.
It's.
They'll show up in another story. They will die.
Rob's death in the books is more ironic, I feel, because he doesn't actually marry the lady because she's a different character in the books, but he doesn't actually marry her out of love because he slept with her and he felt that it was his duty to marry her.
So he was taking it a little bit after his father, then.
Yeah, and he felt that it was his, he would dishonor her by not marrying.
Yeah. That's oddly enough, that's... No, I was going to say that's not modern. That actually is... Well, it depends on the culture, I guess, but... I'll shut up now.
I wouldn't say that Rob was not, fond of her name is Jane in books, but it's just more that he married her not out of love, but, mostly out of honor. And his obligation also to her family, right?
Yeah.
Which bites him in the ass. And, his mom is like, you're fucking dumb. She doesn't say that outright. It's very obvious. Catelyn is like, this is not gonna go well.
I have to say, everyone in that show is perfectly cast. Like every actor. Maybe Viserys, I would have got someone
not
different.
Euron.
What?
Not Euron.
Oh, not
Euron.
not Euron Greyjoy, the gay pirate.
Actually, here's the thing though. I don't think the actor is the problem because the actor is really good. Yeah, the directing is terrible. There's nothing wrong with the actor. He doesn't look like Euron, but that's fine. None of the Greyjoys really look like their book.
The Greyjoys are the least interesting part in the show. Like, I really...
they're like some of the most interesting parts of the books.
Yeah, they're really, like, glossed over in the show. And actually, I think he was perfectly cast, but I think the show did a really bad job with Stannis.
There is a chapter in the book that it's actually a preview chapter for the next book, Winds of Winter. But you can, it's publicly available. You can go and read it now. But you should not read it. You should wait and read it until you finish the books. But I do think you're going to love that chapter.
Okay. Well, I mean, I ordered them. They haven't shown up yet, and then they have to sit in quarantine for a few days.
I think you will get if you get to that chapter in the Winds of Winter, you're going to be very giddy. It deals with a lot of symbolic themes surrounding deifying and replacing ideals and stuff.
Oh, wonderful. I think this answers the person's question that yes, I do like Game of Thrones.
It's all in a very trippy dream sequence kind of thing induced by drugs. It's really weird, but it's really it's very well written. Like, I'm very hyped for that entire plot line in the next book. It's good shit.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading them. I'm kind of hoping they are better than the show, because I do really like the show. Well, most of it anyway. I still haven't seen the final season after everyone freaked out, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch it end on a terrible note, but I don't know.
I don't think I hate the last season as much as everyone else does.
Oh, now we're really gonna get kicked off of YouTube. I'm just kidding.
Here's the thing though, the season was terrible, but I don't think I hate it as much. And the thing is, I think the reason is because I can see a lot of George's fingerprints over it, like the major story beats, right?
Yeah, some of the things that happen in it that I've heard of, I don't necessarily like. I talked to you about it like 2 weeks ago. Daenerys just snapping and destroying a bunch of innocent people, like that has been foreshadowed since before she was born.
Yeah, it will make. I think we talked about it last time, and I think in the books it will make more sense due to the context of it. But ultimately, that is her fate. The same with Jaime. Like that is his.
I don't disagree with him. Like you pointed out, he's a heroin addict. Like I don't disagree with that either. But I haven't seen the actual episodes themselves, so it's possible they did it in a really stupid way. Well, the thing is, I have seen the scene when Daenerys goes crazy and starts burning down people, and it is really funny because, as I've said, it's like the bells trigger a Manchurian Candidate program in her brain or something. It's like filmed in a very funny way.
Yeah, the scene is. I mean, cinematically, it's pretty nice. The season, like the effects are pretty decent, and there's a lot of good like shots in it. I mean, if you're into filmmaking, I guess it's pretty cool. There's a lot of good shots in it.
I don't know, maybe I'll watch it after I finish the books, assuming Santa Claus doesn't die before he finishes the last book, which he probably will, sadly.
Here's the thing: I have accepted I'll probably never get a Dream of Spring, but as long as I get the next book, I'm okay because I know that's all the shit.
Maybe he purposely won't write it because that's the point. There is no spring. Winter's coming, and it will claim him too. Death is coming.
The biggest meta, like the biggest. Meta
I would not put that past him. I don't know. It is funny because I've said it before. I've seen a lot of interviews and stuff with George R. R. Martin, and he seems like this. He does not seem, at least in public, he doesn't seem like the man who made those stories. He seems like this jolly old Santa Claus guy who's just really friendly. He doesn't. One thing I've noticed is he doesn't like tear things apart. Like he's always saying how great Tolkien is and how great things are. He doesn't seem to have like spite in him. I don't know. Maybe I just
he
haven't
really
seen
doesn't like war.
Yeah.
He honestly, he is a big hippie.
He's a big hippie. Oh, well, that might explain the whole Children of the Forest thing, getting a seat of the throne. That might explain that.
The thing is, though, that despite being a hippie, the children thing is not a good thing, and it makes sense more in the books. Like, the children are fucked up. Honestly, they're kind of fucked up. But yeah, he's a big hippie, honestly. Like, he hates... and a lot of his work... the thing is... I know it's weird because most people have only read A Song of Ice and Fire or seen the show, but it's a very George work. Like, if you're familiar with his previous work, it's a very George work.
Yeah,
that's why I can kind of interpret where he's going to go with the story because I'm familiar with his other work. So I
haven't read anything of his yet. I only just discovered in the last year. Yeah, I've only just discovered in the last year that he has a huge library of sci-fi books that he's written over the last 50 years.
His Thousand World kind of anthology is pretty nice. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Hang on a second. All right, sorry about that. I forgot what I was saying. Sorry, I got distracted by neighbors.
No, I guess we can move on. George, just talking about George is actually a very accomplished sci-fi writer, and I'm talking to you guys listening in. If you like A Song of Ice and Fire, you should, and you like sci-fi, I really recommend his previous work. It's really good. It gets overshadowed by A Song of Ice and Fire by quite a lot, but it's definitely some good stuff there. So I recommend checking it out if you want some good reading material.
As someone asked, how's the quarantine been going for me and the missus? Boring, and we're kind of stuck in the building with a bunch of people. Also, Undying Nephilim. Speaking of movies, do you like Godzilla? Yes, I absolutely love Godzilla. I don't know if I have anything else to say. Godzilla is just awesome. It's one of the only.
Godzilla's awesome.
It's one of the only Japanese things I really, really like without any bullet asterisk points. Wispy whiskers. Don't watch past season 5. Yeah, I would say. I mean, I've watched the first 7 seasons. I would say season 4, the end. Basically, the show started to die with Tywin. To me, that's when the kind of spirit of the show just started to fade. Tywin and Tyrion's conflict is the most interesting thing in the whole story, and with that kind of resolved, it just everything else doesn't seem nearly as interesting. So it's like downhill from there. Although rewatching the show, one thing about the later seasons that I really hate is how awesome Littlefinger and Varys are in the first few seasons, and then they just kind of abandon them. And
it's because they ran out of material.
Yeah, like they really build them up to be like the two people behind everything. Like the principle behind everything going on is, I mean, not going up to the supernatural level, but on the material level, they're the head principles. It's related to them too. And in the show, it starts out that way in the show. It's building them two up, and then after and then they just kind of aren't.
There's a very, I'm not gonna, it's kind of tinfoily, but there's a very interesting theory in the books that Littlefinger is actually trying to fulfill prophecy.
Really?
Yeah. We're not sure where that will go yet, but it's kind of, there's some hints there that it's not just the material power is after. There's some, might be some prophecy in there.
Good on George Martin.
The problem, honestly, in the books especially, it feels like everyone is trying to fulfill prophecy. Everyone is trying to fulfill certain stories in their own time to achieve something out of it. It's kind of like, I know a lot of show watchers kind of, and some book readers as well, they kind of glorify Lyanna and Rhaegar's relationship when it's very obvious in the books that he just wanted to fulfill prophecy.
Yeah.
It's like, it's very obvious that...
Poor Robert.
Yeah, like, I'm not even sure if I believe they loved it. Well, I think Lyanna loved him, but I'm not sure if he really loved her. She was more like a means to an end, because he's like, oh, I need to fulfill prophecy.
So, I don't know, maybe Littlefinger and Varys are... I mean, I'm certain they are connected to the more heavenly aspects of the story, but I don't know. I'm really disappointed with. I think of all the story threads in the show anyway. I don't know about the books. Is him and Littlefinger and Varys is I'm most disappointed by. They were built up so much, and then when they split after, I think it's the 4th or 5th. I think in the 4th season, 'cause that's when Varys flees with the Tyrion, and then it just never comes up again, and both of them just do nothing after that. Really. I mean, I guess Littlefinger still, messes with her sister, but.
I mean, it's not even comparable to starting the War of the Five Kings, which he was responsible for. So,
yeah.
But Varys doesn't even make sense in the show because they could cut out the entire Blackfyre and Fagon plot line. Like his entire motivation doesn't make sense in the show at all.
I figured they were just keeping it under wraps until later in the show, because he's basically supposed to, him and Littlefinger, they're supposed to be these giant question marks. They're like super. Yeah. They're both the Sheikah basically. But I get the feeling that based on how, because I know how Varys dies in the show, and he basically does nothing for like the last 3 seasons. So I suspect it's probably related to what you said. They just left out a bunch of stuff. But in the first like 2 to 3 seasons, those two, every time they're on screen, especially when they're on screen together, I'm just sitting there like a beaming smile, like these two guys are so great.
Yeah.
And it just makes me sad knowing that the show goes nowhere with either of them. Has Littlefinger died in the books yet?
No, yes.
Okay.
No, not even close.
All right, good.
Still alive and kicking.
Yeah. The thing is, I won't be surprised if he dies. Just I don't know. The show did. I don't know. The later seasons are kind of weird.
I feel more. The later seasons feel more comic book and movie-esque than medieval fantasy drama. Yeah. Like comic book movie-esque, I guess. It kind of feels like raw action, pew pew, woo.
That is kind of the vibe I got. That one episode when the dragon attacks Jamie and the convoy. I'm like, that scene was fucking awesome, but it was basically a big dumb comic book action scene, like you said.
Yeah.
I remember when I'm watching this, I'm like, this season isn't as bad as people say. This whole thing is awesome, and then I'm like, yeah, that was kind of pointless. It was just a big dumb action scene.
It's like, yeah. I mean, if you like the show for that, that more power to you. That's fine, but that is not a Song of Ice and Fire. Like, there are elements of that in the Song of Ice and Fire, and there are some, all the book readers are waiting for 2 upcoming battles, or actually 3 upcoming battles that are actually 4 upcoming battles. The Battle of Steel, the Battle of Blood, the Battle of Fire, so 4. So there are big, cool battles in the books as well. It's just that there's always a lot of meaning behind those battles. It's not just, wow, we're gonna explode some gold cards or whatever, right? Okay. Like wagons of gold that explode for some reason.
Yeah, they do explode. So Hollywood. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the 7th season isn't as.
And then Drogon flies through the tree, but no one noticed that. He actually does that. When that scene, that shot when he flies over the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, his wing passes through a tree.
That's funny. I gotta look for that now, because I always notice weird CGI things like that. Like, there's a really funny one. Next time you guys watch The Return of the King, when Legolas is doing his thing on the giant elephant, if you look carefully, there's one shot where his body is completely phasing into the body of the Oliphant. It's really funny. It's a funny little goof up.
I think me and my girlfriend were watching that scene with Drogon when Daenerys attacked that convoy, and I remember she was like, "Oh, this is so cool," and I'm like, "Why did his wing pass through the tree?" And I got really hung up on that. I got really hung up on that through the entire episode. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Well, it's because the bar was raised by the quality preceding it. If it was like that through the whole series, it probably wouldn't have bothered you as much.
Yeah, probably not.
It's like Babylon 5. Like, the CGI in Babylon 5 is really wonky, but it's like that from the start, so it's like, I don't know, it engenders less expectations, I guess. But I just realized the whole stream turned into Game of Thrones instead of Hyrule.
Apologies.
I think that definitely answers that person's question. Yes, I do like a lot of things about Game of Thrones. There's a lot of other things I don't like, but let me put it this way. I appreciate Game of Thrones a lot. And I do hope that Game of Thrones does lead to even better things down the road. I suspect my issue with Game of Thrones is George R.R. Martin he's a modern person. But so am I, so who am I one to speak?
Modern people.
Yeah. Let's see. Hyrule Conquest, Marry, Kill, Rudo, Saria, and Impa. I actually posted juicy Impa spoilers yesterday that people seem to like. It's not a spoiler to you. Did we lose Deox?
No, I'm here.
I'm here. Yeah, I don't know, I posted, I guess it's technically spoilers of Impa yesterday on the private Discord, and they seem to like it. But you already know about it, so. Let's see if there's any more questions. Let's see, how long have we been going on for? We've been going on about 3 hours. I guess we could, I don't know, answer any last questions or anything. Unless you have any other topics you want to talk about. I mean, I'm
not really.
stuck in the house, so.
Yeah, I need to get something to eat, and I still need to get to work tomorrow, even though it's only 4 hours. So some sleep would be nice.
All right, well, that was a fun, kind of rambly live stream. Let me just see if there's any questions I can answer really quick. Did you see Godzilla 2014 and King of the Monsters? Yes, I did see both of them. They're all right. I like the 2014 one a little bit, but they're not perfect movies by any means. But I thought they were all right. The new one, the King of the Monsters one, is kind of like what you were saying about Game of Thrones. It's very comic booky. It's just a bunch of giant monsters beating the crap out of each other and not much else. Although, funnily enough, Tywin Lannister's in that movie. Charles Dance is in that movie. He plays the eco-terrorist villain, which is really funny to me.
I fucking love Charles Dance.
He's an absolutely wonderful actor. Honestly, though, he should have. No, maybe he shouldn't have been Stannis. I don't know.
No, I think I think Stannis was well cast, actually.
I do think he was well cast too, because I'm familiar with the actor that played Stannis and other things, but his whole storyline in the show is really boring.
Yeah, I actually quite liked him in the books just because he is such a. But the thing is, he's a bit more set up in the books.
Yeah, he's the only character I was really familiar with before I went into the show, and he sounded awesome. Like, all the art of him and stuff is awesome. Like, this guy is he's a soldier, I guess. Since we're talking about soldiers earlier, I'm like, this guy is like an awesome, general, and then you get the show, and he's just like, he's really milquetoast and boring in the show.
There's some one-liners, yes, in the show that I really like. So when during the Battle of the Blackwater, when they're like, when the soldiers like, but my king, they have archers, hundreds will die, and he just
thousands.
straps on the gun. Yeah,
thousands. That whole sequence is pretty great. The Hound steals the crown, and that scene. I think the Hound has like more one-liners in that whole sequence than he does in the entire show.
Yeah.
And the Hound's one of my least favorite characters too.
The Hound is so good in the books, though.
I don't think he has like one line in the first season. He's like Boba Fett in the first season. He's just there in the background. He just kills the butcher's boy, and I don't know, unless I'm misremembering something. I'm pretty sure the Hound like barely does anything in the first season of the show.
I think I will like him a lot more in the book.
I hope so. I did notice though, because it's fresh in my mind because I just watched the first season. In the first episode, when he's riding into the city with his dog helmet, it's clearly made of rubber because it's like flapping around.
Yeah,
it's really funny. But then when he dismounts and he takes off his helmet, it's an actual metal helmet. And it's probably because when he was riding on the horse in the metal helmet, his head was probably banging around in it. He's like, you get me a fucking rubber helmet. This thing sucks. Gonna get a headache. I don't know.
I think I like the Hound because his character kind of represents not him specifically, but he is a victim of the corruption of knighthood.
Yeah.
He is not. He doesn't represent the corruption, but he is a victim of it. And I think I kind of like that.
Well, that makes sense why him and Brienne of Tarth should definitely butt heads.
Yeah, and
which they do in the show.
Yeah, Brienne is also a victim because, ironically enough, she is probably the one in the entire story that perfectly embodies, the idea of a knight. But because she's a woman, obviously no one acknowledges her as one, which is
Yeah.
kind of her irony.
People need to read the King Arthurian story of Sir Silence. It's a wonderful little story. King Arthurian story about a woman who disguises herself as a man to be a knight. It's a very, very wonderful story. It's really funny.
Yeah, it's a lot of like similar examples of that in fiction and in real world history and folklore.
Oh, someone's actually got a question here, but see, are any of your characters inspired from Game of Thrones? I would definitely say Game of Thrones is kind of forced itself into my conception of my characters, but a lot of the characters I kind of conceptualized before I knew anything about Game of Thrones. So it's more like Game of Thrones seeped into their personalities later on.
Like, the thing is with Game of Thrones, or by extension A Song of Ice and Fire, is that the characters aren't really unique. They're just very relatable human beings, especially in the books. The thing is, when I see a character in the books, I don't necessarily just think of that character. I think of people like that character because they are so realistic in their depiction at times, right?
Yeah, I would definitely say Hylia is a very Game of Thrones style character. And I would say Impa is a very Game of Thrones style character. Impa is very very shadowy.
Scheming.
To some degree Raru. Because of his association with Impa.
Yeah, Rara is great.
I love Raru, and he's not even really done much in Nephi canon yet. He's kind of just. I really can't wait to go back and. Yeah, over the last I think few days, I've shown you in the private Discord snippets of it. I went through the whole Labrina dialogue thing that I did a while ago, and I tried to stamp it out and clear it up. It's still a huge clusterfuck, but for hours I was just like, I don't know, I was trying to flesh out the whole Labrina arc. I'm really looking forward to it. Poor Varen.
Poor Baron.
Poor Ambi and Varen. Someone's asking the Solarisan sound effects. Where did I get them from? I actually, I'm gonna sound like George R. R. Martin. I don't remember what the sound effects were off the top of my head. What they would sounded like. Oh, actually, if what if I think it's just the sound that the silent guards make from Skyward Sword, if I remember right. Solarisans, if I remember right, I just lowered the pitch and add a very, very long echo effect to it so that it sounded like it was, this booming sound effect from a giant. If I remember right, I don't know. I can't remember the sound off the top of my head because my brain is too small to keep track of all this. I think that is actually the last of the questions, unless I'm missing anything. Anyone in the chats, put up your last question. Oh, there actually is 2 more questions. What principality do dragons represent? Dragons are the most... Okay, so I'm definitely going to make those ancient cosmology videos because they're really helpful here, but I think I've talked about it on the live stream before. You have your center, and then you have your periphery, and there's like this margin on the edge of your perception of the world. And when you go into this margin, things you understand start to break down, and you encounter things as hybrids and monsters. And a dragon is basically the most extreme version of that, to the extent of which is possible until you are faced with absolute chaos, basically. The dragons are like the last thing you encounter before you fall into the ocean and are destroyed by Leviathan. They're like the animal version of that, basically. And sometimes dragons find their way into the center and destroy things. So dragons are connected to chaos and potential. Which is why they are usually and almost always portrayed as like this horrifying hybrid of a bunch of different animals. Usually reptilian animals. I mean, the word dragon just means serpent. It basically just means snake. And then there was one other question I saw. What's the lore behind the Tweely Butler? I'll keep him under wraps for now. Oka faction when? Probably after the Sheikah and the Stalfos. And I'm not seeing any other questions. So yeah, last chance, people, for questions, or Deox and I are going to end this. Because we've been going on over 3 hours now. I think it's a good place to wrap it up. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I guess we'll wrap this up then. Maybe we'll do it in 2 or 3 more weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a fun Q&A. Actually, I think that was one of the better live streams. We got a lot of good questions that time too.
Yeah, even though our tangents, while huge, weren't as huge as they tend to be. So.
Yeah. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Thinking maybe we should, since this was kind of like a random Corona.
The random Corona Chan stream. We only talked about Corona for like 5 minutes at the start.
Yeah, I guess next stream we could try to have a more of a defined topic, I guess.
I don't know, maybe something to do with Impa, or I'd probably just do a whole Game of Thrones stream.
The politics of Hyrule Conquest.
The politics of Hyrule Conquest. I could probably go on for several hours about that.
The tax policy of King Kazakh.
Give me your rupees or die. There's a tax policy. No, I'm just kidding. All right, well, that was fun. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed that.
Thank you guys.
Deox and I will probably do one of these sometime in the next 2 weeks. I don't think we were doing it every weekend, and then we kind of stopped. I think we burned out really fast.
Maybe, I think if we decide a time, I probably will announce our rough estimate on Discord, so people have some time to, have some heads up.
Yeah.
Could be good. So that, they know, I'll clear my schedule if they really, if they can clear their schedule if they really want to tune in.
Yeah, I would estimate in like sometime in 2 to 3 weeks. We'd probably do another stream. Maybe we'll pick a topic, or I don't know, if we can't think of one, it'll just be another one of these.
We're all stuck inside anyway. So.
Yeah. But I'm gonna take the rest of the day off and play Stellaris, and then I'm probably gonna start on the Hylians tomorrow. Yeah. Or I don't know. I might want to do some not gameplay related stuff for the next few days. I really feel like I should finish the Labyrinth, ironing out all of the missions and the dialogue, so it's not just a chaotic mush blob. Even though I won't be able to start on it for probably a year or 2 from now, because I'm stuck getting all the factions in right now. But
it's good to have an idea of where you want to go, and then you could always edit it later. But I think it's nice to have just a rough sketch of where you want to go with everything.
Yeah, so I might do that tomorrow. But anyway, thank you guys for listening. Hope you all have a good one. And see you guys next time.